according to CNN last night. It was a big breaking story, ready to launch an uprising on the ground in Iran. That's being denied tonight by the Kurds themselves, the regional Kurd government. However, there is still some pretty strong suspicion that that could be the case. I guess more will become clear over the next 24 hours. Just to give you a flavour of what happened here at the press briefing room at the White House today, this is Caroline Levitt answering questions from reporters a bit earlier.
The objectives of Operation Epic Fury are the 4 military objectives that I laid out for you previously. To destroy Iran's navy, to destroy their ballistic missile capacity, to ensure their proxies in the region can no longer harm Americans, and to also ensure that they can never obtain a nuclear weapon. As for what comes next for Iran, the president has said, of course, it's a good thing for the United States to want freedom for the Iranian people, and ultimately we hope that freedom rests in their hands.
So that press briefing, Bev, followed another briefing this morning, 8 in the morning, from Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War at the Pentagon. I've been saying all day, and it's the best way I can articulate this, whilst there's a war going on in the Middle East with bombs dropping and ships firing and torpedoes going off, there's also a war here on the streets in DC with regards to the Trump administration, because they are in a PR war to try and convince the American public and indeed the rest of the world that this war is legitimate and they have a plan. Pete Hegseth made some pretty stark revelations this morning, not least that they'd killed the Iranian head of an assassination unit who tried taking out President Trump in the not-so-recent past couple of months. Let's take a look at that.
We've known for a long time that Iran had intentions on trying to kill President Trump and or other U.S. Officials. And while that was not the focus of the effort by any stretch of the imagination, in fact, never raised by the president or anybody else, I ensured and others ensured that those who were responsible for that were eventually part of the target list. It wasn't the beginning of the effort. We were focused on missiles and launchers, and that's the focus. But ultimately, if we had the opportunity to get at those who are trying to get at Americans specifically, we would. Iran cannot outlast us. We're going to ensure through violence of action and our offensive capabilities and our defensive capabilities, as I said, that we set the tone and the tempo of this fight.
Elsewhere in that press conference at the Pentagon, Bev, Hegseth revealed the, well, it was a massive achievement for the Navy, the US Navy last night, who sunk an Iranian warship some 2,000 miles away from Iran. It was in international waters, using one of their own submarines. This extraordinary footage you can see now, viewers, if you're watching on television. This is the US submarine launching a torpedo at the Iranian ship. It was the first time, said Hegseth, that a torpedo had sunk a rival vessel in waters since World War II. I mentioned that this morning. I repeated the Secretary of War's comments, and the GBNews viewers, and credit to them, were on it like a shot. Of course, it was the Belgrano, the sinking of the Belgrano in the Falklands in, I think it was 1982, where a Royal Navy torpedo sunk that ship. But Hegseth later clarifying his comments, saying it was the last time a US fleet downed a rival ship using a torpedo, Bev. So it's all kicking off. That footage there, the aftermath was 87 Iranian bodies recovered from the waters by Sri Lankan authorities. The United States here tonight getting some stick, actually, for this incident. People saying that that ship there, the Iranian ship, wasn't really involved in the war. It was 2,000 miles away in international waters, and some, particularly on the left, as you'd expect them to do, criticising the US for gloating about the sinking. But it's all kicking off. As you said, Bev, we're only in day 5, but it feels like we are, much longer into this conflict than the reality suggests.
It does. And Ben, you mentioned the war on the ground here in America, which is to win the hearts and minds of the American people that this is a war that they should be involved in. And just tell us about the moment in the briefing room today where Caroline Levitt took on CNN presenter Caitlin Collins, and that got very fiery, didn't it? What did she accuse Caitlin of doing?
So Caitlin Collins, of course, I mean, this happens week on week in the press briefing room. Caitlin Collins, the massive CNN star here in America. She's the network's top anchor. She's always in the briefing room. President Trump, some weeks ago, viewers and listeners may remember, he lambasted Caitlin Collins in the Oval Office for saying, "I've never seen you smile. In all the years I've known you, I've never seen you once pull a smile or look happy. What's wrong with you?" Today in the press briefing room, it was Caroline Levitt's turn to go after Caitlin Collins again. Caitlin asked a question about the deaths of 6 US military personnel in, I think it was Kuwait, over the past couple of days. She was suggesting that Pete Hegseth was saying this morning in the Pentagon briefing that the US media shouldn't be reporting on US deaths. That's not quite what Pete Hegseth was saying. He was saying, amongst paying tribute to those fallen soldiers, those fallen men and women, he was saying that there are so many wins, so many victories thus far since Saturday that the media just hasn't been reporting on. Caroline Levitt snapped back at Caitlin Collins saying, the only thing you ever do, the only thing you and CNN and your colleagues at CNN ever report on is to try and make President Trump look bad. You never once make an effort to report on the achievements or the accomplishments of this administration. Your sole aim is to make the president look bad, no matter what the discussion, what the issue. So yeah, just one little soundbite where it just proves how feisty the press briefing was today, and it shows how high tensions are as well. There's a lot at stake here, not least for the American men and women fighting this war out in the Middle East. There's a massive political gamble here for the Trump administration. If it goes wrong, then it could be the end of any potential 2028, 2029 re-election for the Republican Party, maybe Rubio or Vance. And of course, the geopolitical conclusion as well with allies. President Trump being accused of severing ties with the likes of the UK, Europe and international friends all across the world. So lots at stake, tensions high, Bev.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ben. Thank you so much, Ben Leo, there outside the White House. Let me turn to my panel here. These tensions are high, and Caroline Levitt, for me, she does the most amazing job in that briefing room. I think she's phenomenal. But she did look a little rattled today, Tim, I thought. And she really came out swinging on this accusation with CNN. It was other publications and other networks as well, saying you will, whatever President Trump does, whatever he does, you will try and depict him as the bad guy. You never want anything that he does to look positive. And you can see in relation to this war, because the messaging is so complicated, she's desperate to get them on side, and they're not there.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a frustration, because what she's seeing and what she's seeing behind the scenes is she's seeing a president who's not dithering. She's seeing a president who's very resolved. He's seeing a president who is not going to 1,000 different sources and, you know, waiting years in order to make a decision like prior presidents have made, but actually doing what he promised he was going to do, and that's to keep America safe. Keep America safe. This action is the most comprehensive, solid way to do that, and I think that she's simply frustrated from that. I'm frustrated from that because what has President Trump done with foreign policy except for prove his detractors wrong time and time again? He was right with Fordo, he was right with Soleimani, he was right in Venezuela, he is right in foreign policy, and we should be backing him at this point.
Richard Goodstein, I imagine you will have a slightly different opinion on that, will you?
What did the president promise when he ran for election?
To keep people safe?
No foreign wars. We're going to end wars, and we're not going to start any new ones.
He promised that Iran would never get a nuclear weapon.
Let him say out his stall.
Come on.
Go on.
The reason that Caroline Levitt was rattled is because she knows that these right-wing influencers with massive followings, tens of millions of people, Tucker Carlson, who said this was a travesty, Candace Owens, who said that Netanyahu was basically dragging Trump around by the nose, Megyn Kelly, who named 3 prominent Jews, Miriam Adelson and Mark Levin, etc., Ben Shapiro, as responsible for the U.S. attacking Iran. That's what's got her rattled, that she knows that the hardcore MAGA base, especially among young people, is quite dissatisfied with what's going on. So she can, look, every time they open their mouth, everything's fake news unless it's come from the right. And now even on the right, They're not hearing what they want. It's not,
just to explain, because some of our British viewers won't know who those people are necessarily, but Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens as well, people who went from mainstream media on the right wing and now have their own independent journalist outlets. Their concern, their complaint is that America First does not involve being controlled by a foreign power in the form of Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu. That is what they are concerned about.
First of all,
how does that fit with America
First of all,
First?
it's just important because he referred to them as MAGA, and they're not MAGA. They are not MAGA. President Trump is MAGA. That's who defines what MAGA is. Whether you like it or not, President Trump defines what MAGA is. They don't define what MAGA is. So yeah, they don't agree with this.
They speak to the right-wing base, though,
a few people on the right-wing base, but not the entire right-wing base. A majority of Republicans who are the party that support President Trump are well in favor of this action. 70% are well in favor of this action. It is very, very popular because he is doing exactly what he said he was going to do in the campaign, Rich, which is ensure that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. That was his main promise. It's not going to happen under his watch, and it's not going to happen in the future. And this action is exactly because of that. It's not a war.
The challenge, though, let me take this to Charlie Riley. We've got a couple of hours to talk about this. But, Charlie, the challenge for President Trump is to tell the American people, I'm saving you from something that hasn't happened yet. And I've said it before in the last 5 days. That is a very, very difficult sell.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Until something has happened, until you have to respond to something, then it is, as you say, very difficult to sell to whether it's the UK public or the international community that you've got to act. But not taking action is also a decision, and that decision could prove fatal in the long term if Iran was able to then go on to develop nuclear weapons. It was enriching uranium, something that it said it was going to stop doing, but continued, it seems to me, to do. It continues to fund international terrorism and organisations like the Houthis, Hezbollah and Hamas that have carried out awful atrocities. So not getting involved is a decision. But you, I think, out there in the US, you know, the country that is so brilliant, you are a victim, I'm afraid, of your own success. You know, you have the biggest military might in the world, and President Trump, I think, was absolutely right to say to us Europeans that we need to stump up and fund our own defence systems, that America can't police the world and shouldn't be policing the world. We should be able to stand up on our own 2 feet and fight our own conflicts if we need to. However, when there is a country, an organisation, a brutal regime that is aligning itself with the likes of Russia and China, that is happy to fund this international terrorism, that is anti-Western, that wants to kill us here in the UK, that wants to attack us and Western values. And as the report said earlier on, you know, there was a plot to assassinate President Trump. I heard earlier on the other week there was another assassination attempt to get rid of John Bolton, who used to be the National Security Advisor out there. So this is not a regime that I think wants, or certainly doesn't have America's best interests at heart. So it's right, I think, to get involved. And I think that hopefully the American people can get that message.
Well, there was a very powerful... Thank you, Charlie. Let me know at home what you think, won't you? GBNews.com/you'll say there was a very powerful moment in the briefing room today where Caroline Levitt looked around the room at all the journalists and she said, if the Iranian regime had their way, they would kill every single person in this room. And that seemed to land. GBNews.com/you'll say. Still to come this evening on The Late Show Live.
But the hardest hits are yet to come from the U.S. military. The next phase will be even more punishing on Iran than it is right now.
That's Marco Rubio, but, you know, Sir Keir Starmer says the US has no viable plan for Iran as the White House warns the hardest hits are yet to come. I'm going to talk to President Trump's former National Security Council Chief of Staff, Fred Fleece, next.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Late Show Live. Well, the Prime Minister has accused President Trump of lacking a viable, thought-through plan for the Iran war as a separate conflict between America and Britain continues to grow.
What I was not prepared to do on Saturday was for the UK to join a war unless I was satisfied there was a lawful basis and a viable, thought-through plan. That remains my position.
Now, of course, I'm sure you're aware that those comments followed this scathing attack line from President Trump yesterday.
By the way, I'm not happy with the UK either. That island that you read about, the lease, okay, he made it for whatever reason, he made a lease of the island. Somebody came and took it away from him. And it's taken 3-4 days for us to work out where we can land there. It would have been much more convenient landing there as opposed to flying many extra hours. So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
Well, with me now is President Trump's former National Security Council Chief of Staff and friend of the show, Fred Fleets. Fred, thank you. Good to see you again. Now, what kind of mindset will the President be in at the moment? You know him well under these circumstances. What kind of mindset will he be in, and how hurt will he be by the actions of Prime Minister Starmer?
Well, I think all Americans are disappointed that the Brits are not fighting with us against the Iranians. I mean, your country may have a smaller military, but it's very well regarded for its expertise. The Council of British Military Commanders would be most welcome in this dispute, and we have a history of fighting as side by side in conflicts like this. Like Starmer is a pretty far-left politician. That's why he's not doing this. When he says he thinks this isn't consistent with international law and that we don't achieve regime change from the air, well, the UK did that in Libya. It went far beyond UN Security Council resolutions to knock out the Gaddafi regime. Sometimes things have to be done that can't be approved by the UN Security Council to promote international security. We know the Chinese and Russians won't permit Security Council resolutions, so Starmer really can't criticize Trump for not going to the UN.
I mean, there's a very good chance, Fred, that the Prime Minister is being disingenuous when he talks about the fact that the legal framework wasn't put in place around this conflict. There's a very, very good possibility that he's actually appealing to the rather large contingency of Muslim voters that he very much needs in the UK to get him through the local elections in May and then, of course, the next general election. But will President Trump forgive him as they move forward with their relationship? Because loyalty is very important to him, isn't it?
Starmer might be doing that, but I understand there were large demonstrations of ethnic Persians who were praising what President Trump did in London and praising the death of Supreme Leader Khamenei. They're not going to be voting for Starmer in this upcoming election. I think this is simply a blip in our long friendship. We'll get over this. No one's going to remember Starmer in a couple of years. He's never going to survive elections whenever they're held. His polling is so bad, and I understand he has other political problems on domestic issues.
And let me talk about this war that we've referenced earlier in the show, which is with the American public. This is the war on truth, intent and motivation behind this conflict. Caroline Levitt getting really frustrated in the briefing room today with the media to say, effectively saying, you don't get it, you don't understand. When she said the Iranian regime would kill every person in this room if they could, how do you get that message across, Fred, to the American public that this is necessary?
I think there has to be more briefings by the President, by the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, to make it clear that as an adversary, Iran is very different. The Americans have had many adversaries through history, but this one has been trying to assassinate the President of the United States. His cabinet is responsible for the death of thousands of American service members, is a state sponsor of terror, was linked to the Hamas attack on Iran on October 7th. I mean, this really is a terrorist state of the first order. It's a state that does not want to exist peacefully with its neighbors and was building nuclear missile programs that were eventually going to be so far advanced there would be no way to stop them. And when Iran fired missiles at Israel first during the Biden administration, we found out the intention of that missile program. And when it was rebuilt, I think that that's the first thing Iran would do.
I wonder also whether the messaging was quite right around the fact that the negotiations could go no further. So the Iranian regime, Caroline Levitt said today, the regime chose not to negotiate in good faith. I wonder whether it's just that the American public don't feel that they saw that, they didn't understand that at the time that was all going on behind closed doors. And even though people in studios like this were coming in on a regular basis and saying, it wasn't if you were going to invade Iran, it was when you were going to start attacks on Iran. I wonder whether it's the fact that it appeared to come out of the blue to a lot of Americans.
Well, the Iranian government plays negotiations quite well. They always say there's hope for negotiations, there's hope for a deal, it's just around the corner, let's keep talking. And they've done this repeatedly with American presidents, with British prime ministers, French and German officials. President Trump was not going to negotiate endlessly with the Iranians. They were not making any significant concessions to address our concerns about their missile and nuclear programs. They refused to give up uranium enrichment, which is part of their nuclear weapons program. As long as they would not make that concession, we were not going to get an agreement.
Yeah. Fred, brilliant as always. President Trump's former National Security Council Chief of Staff, Fred Fleets there. Let's get a British perspective on this. I'm now joined by the former Conservative MP and British Army officer, James Sunderland. Good evening, James. Good to see you. Maybe you can shed a little light on what's motivating Keir Starmer to be, well, let's face it, rather uncooperative with President Trump and not shying away in terms of the war of words between the two of them today.
Well, good evening, Bev. In the context of the special relationship,
what's been happening over the last 2 or 3 days is quite extraordinary. And I can't recall, certainly in recent history, a US president being quite so critical of a British Prime Minister. These scenes are quite striking. And to have an American president directly criticise a British Prime Minister on the world's media is extraordinary. And my sense is that Starmer has probably not helped in terms of not making an early enough decision to suit the Americans. But by the same token, Keir Starmer is a lawyer. And as he said in the Commons today, it's important for him to make sure that the law is right and that the situation is legal before he makes the decision to commit troops.
James, I want to get your reaction to what Sir Keir Starmer said today about the Conservatives' legacy at PMQs. Here it is.
Not only did they cut the defence budget, they missed army recruitment targets every year for 14 years. They left morale in our armed forces at an all-time low, and our forces hollowed out. That's the words of Ben Wallace, the former Defence Secretary.
He's got a point, hasn't he? 14 years of Conservative rule, low morale, and the troops and all our military hollowed out.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, actually. 14 years of Conservatives has been pilloried, it's been criticised, but ultimately in 2010, when obviously we had a Conservative Prime Minister come in, we'd had a long campaign in Iraq, long campaign in Afghanistan, and quite clearly it was necessary to rebuild, reconstitute British forces. That has happened. There has been successive increases in the defence budget, but ultimately not enough. And I suspect that with NATO commitments and with the rise of Russian aggression once again in Ukraine, the Conservative government made the decision to increase defence spending in terms of GDP. That's absolutely happened. Ben Wallace was very, very forceful in that. Ben Wallace is certainly, with Boris Johnson and other Conservative politicians, set that particular trend within NATO. Defence spending is now increasing across NATO. NATO, to a certain extent, has the UK government to thank for that in terms of setting that trend, setting that way. I think ultimately we're in a situation now where the Labour government is certainly getting in on the back of that. And whether we like it or not, defence spending is necessary. It is non-discretionary. I think defence of the realm is the most important aspect of government. It's the most important right that any government has. It's the Conservatives that increase defence spending towards the back end of their tenure. And I think it's not entirely appropriate for Keir Starmer to criticise the Conservatives when actually the money that he promised is not being made available for quite some time, 2027.
OK, James. Thank you so much. James Sunderland there, former Conservative MP and British Army officer. Right, still to come this evening on The Late Show Live.
Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15.
As thousands of Iraqi Kurds launch a ground invasion in Iran, what are Iranians hoping will materialise from this war? This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
and each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce,
and me, Miriam Cates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I ever got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Iran does pose an imminent indirect threat to the United States of America based on the fact that they are the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism.
Welcome back to the Late Show Live. Now, we are hearing reports this evening, but they haven't been confirmed yet, that Iraqi Kurds, potentially thousands of them, might have launched a major ground invasion in Iran that would help to topple the Islamic Republic's regime. Both America and Israel are said to have been smuggling weapons to Kurdish volunteers since last year. And we're considering tonight, what is it that the Iranian people want and need now? Reform, revolution, stability after years of turmoil. What is it that is the best that they can hope for? I'm delighted to say that I'm joined in the studio by Middle East policy analyst at the Foundation for the Defence of Democracies, Janatan Sayah. Again, Janatan, so good to see you. Just explain to me this rumour, we think it is, about these Kurdish forces. Who are they? They may be leveraged by the American and Israeli governments to do what?
So that's an excellent point, and as you pointed out, this has not been confirmed yet by any means. We do know that Iran, of course, has different ethnic groups, one of them being the Kurdish population, that many of these, of course, entities that we're talking about, they're not simply militias. You're talking about separatist movements, of course, very fragmented. There's about 5 of them, and each of them has its own factions within it. You know, the idea
Hang on, we're on the back. So there's 5 factions of Kurdish Iranians?
Specifically. Yes, and you know, it's a subset of a subset. So you also have the Iraqi
Good luck,
Kurdish.
President Trump. I don't know how you're going to sort this out. Carry on, sorry.
No, and I think you point out something very significant, that given how fragmented these groups are, they do not pose a unified command, which is why it's not really in our strategic interest to be tapping into any sort of ethnocentric policies across the Middle East. That has never worked out for America. It has definitely not worked out for Israelis trying to arm one group against another. We should really be wary about how, I mean, assuming it's even true.
Well, does it depend, therefore, on which group of Kurdish separatists have been armed to go in, depending on whether they're the good guys or the bad guys?
It's not necessarily about good versus evil. It's about, you know, advancing our interests in the region. And of course, we don't want to see more balkanization. We do not want to see more instability. We want to see a national unified country, whether it's Iraq or Iran in this context. More importantly, any effort from the US or Israel to try to elevate the separatist groups would delegitimize the campaign in the eyes of the average Iranian. Of course, Iranians are very proud of their national identity. That is a major red line, and it would certainly give the Islamic Republic a talking point if we were to go and pursue this separatist agenda that would, you know, arm them really with this talking point that the imperial powers are here to weaken the country and here to balkanize the country.
It is so complicated, and I do not mind admitting that I feel like an idiot sometimes when we start talking about this particular topic. But back to my original question about the Iranian people right now. We're seeing pictures of enormous explosions in Iran, and a lot of people on social media are asking, how is this benefiting the Iranian people? Because presumably there's lots of them are being killed.
So we have to look at where these targets are, and primarily how's the division of labor between American and Israeli forces. When you look at what America's targeting is primarily large-scale operations, such as Islamic Republic's naval force, missile sites, some silos, but we're really going after their launching ability as opposed to the missiles themselves. Yeah. Israelis, on the other hand, are going after the more urban targeted areas, specifically going after repression buildings and targeted assassinations. So I was looking at some of the videos, and you look at Tehran, it's never looked like that before. Of course, it is very concerning. But that said, you see exactly what Israelis are taking out. These are pillars of repression that have brutalized Iranian protesters in the past while. So if you're an Iranian citizen really walking down the street in Tehran, you see the local IRGC Basij or police base that was used to kill your loved ones, where they abused your loved ones. That's going to resonate with you, because that is the main pillar that the Islamic Republic has used to suppress civic discontent. And of course, it's going to resonate with Iranians, but more importantly, it's going to provide them with an opportunity to rise up. So it would allow them to finally breathe.
See, that is so interesting, because the way that this is being depicted on social media is this is Israel at it again. People saying they won't be happy until Iran looks like Gaza. Somebody needs to reign in Israel. They're going to destroy Iran. They're going to kill all these people who are looking for freedom. What would you say to that?
We have to, first of all, again, as we said, let's talk about what Israel is carrying out. You know, I was looking at a few of these photos. They are so precisely targeting a specific, not even a building, sometimes it's just a floor of a building. Again, that tells you they're going after regime officials. Average Iranian does not perceive this as an attack on the Iranian national identity, is more so taking out the repressors. Another angle is we see more and more videos coming out from regime forces actually stationing themselves in schools, increasingly using as a shield, a tactic that was used by Hamas before. It was established that regime officials, IRGC specifically, are holding different meetings inside hospitals. Again, tells you. Even the spokesperson of the government held a conference inside a school, knowing that he's going to be a target. So of course they're going to use this shield. They're trying to play the victim. But despite what the international community thinks, Iranians on the ground know their regime better than anyone. They know what the agenda is. They know who's here to defend their interests versus who's there to further repress them.
So the Iranian people, in your opinion, at the moment on the ground in Iran, in Tehran, despite the fact that there seems to be a huge amount of destruction, we think that more than 1,000 Iranians are currently dead. Plus extra casualties, of course. The majority of people are still on board with what President Trump is doing.
They certainly are. Again, not to say they want regime changes at any cost. They do not want to see their country balkanized. They do not want to, of course, to see more attacks against major infrastructure, which we have not seen. There's been no attack on oil refineries or bridges. Again, targeted assassinations. And when you hear the numbers of 1,000, it does not tell you if they're actual regime officials or not. Well, that is also very
we know
clear.
there was 50 of them went in the first day, I think, pretty much. That was pretty good. Okay, Jonathan, you're always brilliant on this topic. It's so interesting, and honestly, thank you for educating me out of my vacuum when it comes to the different types of Kurdish separatists. Right, let me know what you think. GBNews.com/your say. I'm going to read your messages just now because we're going to take a quick break. But week. That's the headline on the front page of today's Daily Express as Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch rips into the Prime Minister. Is she right? This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point.
Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. I am Bev Turner. Now, still to come this evening, President Trump has threatened complete and total dominance over Iran's airspace. And tonight, I will bring you an update on that very shortly. We're also just getting some breaking news. We're hearing that Iran has just launched more missiles towards Israel. We'll bring you more on that as we get it. Your messages have been coming in thick and fast tonight. Whinging Palm says, I wonder if a few hundred Iranians turning up to Cyprus RAF base in half a dozen dinghies, they'd be escorted in, fed, given money and all the trimmings. I started reading that before I got to the end, but I think it's acceptable to say that. Glennis says, I think Starmer's insistence on sticking to international law is making this country less secure than it's ever been. We don't need a silk, we need a strategist. And Roy says Starmer needs to up his game. He is the worst PM we've ever had. He is a lawyer, not a leader. Right, let's have a quick look at the newspapers, shall we, over in the UK, how they are covering the war in Iran. Trump's war goes global, says the front page of the Metro. Look at that photograph. Wow. OK, if you're listening on the radio, that wasn't terribly helpful. Tim, help me out. What am I looking at here?
You're looking at brothers, young kids, in a field, and a looks to be an unexploded missile, sort of half in the ground and half out, and while they are running around playing. And
it's taller than they are.
Yeah.
It says Iran's military, it's basically saying this extended to Syria and Turkey as deadly revenge mission goes on.
Looks photoshopped.
It does look
AI.
You don't know what is AI anymore, do you?
Yeah.
The Daily Telegraph is claiming that Energy Secretary Ed Miliband led the opposition to the military action and the use of UK bases. That will be very interesting, given that Ed Miliband is often touted as a Prime Minister in waiting, that he will be Keir Starmer's successor. What do you think of that, ladies and gentlemen, if he really was the guy that put the brakes on us getting involved? And a picture there of the wonderful Angela Rippon, news presenter, who did a Strictly Come Dancing event at Portcullis House today in Westminster. This is full of MPs in the background. That's the new Green Party MP in the suit there. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later as well, what happened today. The Mirror front page, blown out of the water, US submarine torpedoes and sinks Iranian ship. And then another big story of an MP whose husband has been arrested over allegations that he's been spying for China. The Express are going with Kemi Badenoch's speech from PMQs today. Weak. They lead on that attack on the Prime Minister. I mean, it's so easy, really, isn't it? Shooting fish in a barrel to go after Starmer today at PMQs. She lambasted him for his handling of the Middle East crisis earlier today. The Guardian, although Kemi Badenoch will be delighted with that front page, The Guardian reports that at least 87 people have been killed after an Iranian warship was struck by the US. You see, this is interesting, Richard, because that is 87 dead Iranians on the ship, but obviously The Guardian is portraying this as a tragedy, and of course it is a tragedy for those people. This is war. They are fighting for the Iranian regime, right? What am I missing?
Nothing. But it's interesting, this morning at the Pentagon, there were two people that spoke about this. One was Secretary Hegseth, the other was General Kane, who's the leading military person.
Kane.
Kane spoke about this with a great deal of solemnity, that, you know, we've lost lives. This is serious business. Hegseth talked about it like he was a kid playing in the bathtub with a submarine sinking a toy ship. Like it was if you listen to him, there was this sense of excitement that I didn't think quite met the moment. So I think just the contrast between the lifelong military person, the former Fox News host in Hegseth, one talking about it as a military person, one who's all about the image.
Let's look at the Daily Mail. They're going with the headline, New Iran War Flashpoints. Let's bring that up. There we go. Daily Mail, New Iran War Flashpoint. Labour ensnared, they've got the two stories also, Labour ensnared in China spy probe. The Daily Mail never knowingly giving up the opportunity to have a go at Labour. Obviously, that's almost as big, an MP's husband being accused of being a spy, almost as big as this huge event in the Middle East. And The Times is reporting Britain's allies in the Gulf and Cyprus have accused the Prime Minister of not doing enough to protect the region from Iranian missile strikes. Joining me in Washington, as you know, my panel this evening, Tim Doescher and Richard Goodstein. I've also got Charlie Rowley in London. In fact, Charlie, maybe we should go to you now to look at those front pages and how they are depicting this. On the whole, how would you sum up the British press when it comes to how they are depicting this conflict? They are almost being as tentative as the Prime Minister. It's like the editors don't quite know which way to go with it either, do they?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Bev, because I think if you ask the British public in certain polls, the majority of people don't really want the UK to get involved in another foreign conflict. It's probably quite the same as the American citizens, but that's the easy option. Of course, if you were asked that question, it would be very easy to say, no, we don't want to get involved, you know, it's not our problem, it's miles away, let's just, you know, carry on as we were. But it's not necessarily the right decision, which is obviously a lot harder. So, you know, there are some front pages that are obviously still holding the Prime Minister's feet to the fire, rightly so, like the Express and the Mail there, about the Prime Minister's decision-making, you know, being far too slow. And what's really telling for me is that, and you know, what people I think are beginning to pick up on is that the whole Prime Minister's point of saying why he didn't allow the US to use our air bases, why he didn't want to get involved, is because he said there was no viable, thought-through plan. You can understand that, even if you don't agree with it, and I don't agree with it, if he thought as an international lawyer the threshold wasn't high enough to get involved, because he's got his own party to look after, because of the historical events of Iraq. And if you've got, as you were talking about, Ed Miliband, former leader of the Labour Party, who voted down David Cameron's airstrikes against Syria, all of that pressure, you can sort of forgive the Prime Minister for making that decision not to get involved. But what you can't forgive him for, and what I think the papers are picking up on, is this idea of not having a viable, thought-through plan when he's not prepared to send British air carriers or warships to an area, knowing knowing the consequences. OK, we won't get involved, but you must know that consequences are that the UK Air Forces, like in Cyprus, are going to be targeted. So we should have been much more prepared than what we were.
Yeah, broken Britain, Charlie. The trains don't come on side and neither do the military ships. Right, more to come in the next hour, including this.
President Trump has expressed his disagreement with the decision that we took about not getting involved in those initial strikes. But the Prime Minister took that decision on the basis of our national interest.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Morning. Thanks for joining me for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of a chilly start out there, but for many of us, it's going to be quite warm by this afternoon in the sunshine, certainly over England and Wales. More cloud and some rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A damp start, certainly for Northern Ireland and the west coast of Scotland. Eastern Scotland, it's fairly cloudy, but it's largely dry here. That rain only slowly creeping towards Edinburgh, but quite a damp day in Glasgow and Belfast. We may see some showery rain on the west coast of Wales, perhaps into Isles of Scilly too, but generally for most of England and Wales dry, and certainly for most of the Midlands and eastern England it's very warm and sunny. Temperatures getting up to 16, 17, maybe 18, perhaps even 19 degrees Celsius. Now the rain will slowly creep its way down into parts of northern England. At the same time, it should be clearing from northwest Scotland by the end of the day, but it will eventually arrive on the east coast of Scotland, so things turning damp for the evening rush hour in Aberdeen. And the rain by this stage trying to pull away from Northern Ireland, but it may not have completely cleared from Belfast, pushing into northwest England, north and west Wales too by this stage, but still largely dry and clear over the Midlands and eastern England. The rain will continue to edge southwards, but kind of fizzle out as it does so. So turning damp over parts of northern England as the rain moves in. There'll be a bit of snow over the tops of the hills. Clearer skies for western Scotland, Northern Ireland means it will turn quite cold here with a touch of frost further south, while temperatures mostly holding up, certainly towns and cities at 6 or 7 degrees, a little warmer in the southeast. So Friday sees this line of clouds still providing some outbreaks of rain over northern England and Wales, but it will be fizzling out as we go through the day. Should be pulling away from southeast Scotland, so Edinburgh turning drier. A much brighter day tomorrow for Belfast and Glasgow. Plenty of sunshine over the Highlands, but a cloudier day further south and east, and nowhere near as warm tomorrow, certainly across the Midlands and northern England. Quite a bit chillier.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised. I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back live from Washington, D.C. This is GB News with the stories shaping Britain and America tonight.
Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15.
Operation Epic Fury continues to take flight as the White House vows to take complete and total dominance of Iranian airspace, also tonight.
Iran does pose an imminent and direct threat to the United States of America based on the fact that they are the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism.
Meanwhile, Britain's strategic base in Cyprus is relying on allies for protection as HMS Dragon is left sitting in Portsmouth. Plus. Breaking tonight, we are hearing reports of thousands of Iraqi Kurds launching a ground invasion in Iran as they aim to topple the Islamic Republic's regime. That's yet to be confirmed, but if it is true, it will be incredibly significant as we look at these pictures here of Israel, live pictures also tonight.
But the hardest hits are yet to come from the U.S. military. The next phase will be even more punishing on Iran than it is right now.
Marco Rubio there putting up a staunch defence of this military action because the countdown is on until American stealth bombers land at British bases to join the attacks on Iran, as both President Trump and Marco Rubio warn that the big one is still to come. It might be tonight. I'm Bev Turner. This is a special extended edition of The Late Show Live, and remember, no breaks this hour. Still with me in the panel, in the studio here, my panel, Executive Director of Unleash Prosperity, Tim Doscher, and his regular adversary now in this studio, Democrat strategist Richard Goodstein. I do like you two going at each other. Always entertaining.
We like it too. This is entertainment for us.
Good. And in London, the very polite political commentator, very English Charlie Rowley, is also with us to get involved. Thank you guys for all being here. So let's tackle, of course, the main breaking news this evening. This is the idea with a notion. We heard Janatan Sayeh in the studio here explaining a little bit about what this would mean if true. This would be that thousands of Iraqi Kurds would be launching a major ground invasion in Iran. That is the only way, it would seem, to topple the Islamic Republic's regime. Now, both America and Israel are thought to have been smuggling weapons to Kurdish volunteers since last year. Meanwhile, American B-2 stealth bombers are expected to land at British military bases in a matter of days to join attacks on Iran, as the White House warns that the biggest hits are yet to come. But Britain's airbase in Cyprus is yet again vulnerable. We are having to be protected by our European allies. Why? Because the Royal Navy's guided missile destroyer HMS Dragon is breathing no fire. It is not expected to reach Cyprus for 2 weeks. And earlier today, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer tore in to President Trump.
What I was not prepared to do on Saturday was for the UK to join a war unless I was satisfied there was a lawful basis and a viable, thought-through plan. That remains my position.
And breaking within the past few moments, the US Central Command have just released the following video.
The United States and its partners have launched Operation Epic Fury,
the most lethal, most complex, and most precise aerial operation in history.
Our military in the Middle East is undertaking an unprecedented operation to eliminate Iran's ability to threaten Americans, as they've been doing for nearly half a century. We are also sinking the Iranian Navy, the entire Navy.
We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it.
Combat operations continue at this time in full force, and they will continue until all of our objectives are achieved.
OK, let's cross it live. That literally has just landed now. That's the White House's footage of Operation Epic Fury. Let's go live to the White House and speak to GB News' chief US correspondent, Ben Leo. Ben, I don't know whether you were able to see that, Ben, there outside the White House. What we're kind of looking at with all of this footage, this very cinematic footage of war, it's a kind of, I'm going to invent a new word here. It's like the Netflixication of war, isn't it? That's what we're looking at. It looks like a trailer for a box set when we're looking at it. I don't know about you, but it does make me feel a little queasy. But this, Ben, might be because this is American politicians, this is the White House trying to communicate the messaging to the American public in a language that they will understand.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. It was the first time I'd seen that footage just now as you played it. I've literally, as the viewers are back home. I mean, really well put together, great production. I'm not too sure who it would be aimed at, though, other than die-hard supporters of the administration and the operation in Iran, because I can't see any Democrats watching that and thinking, well, if that's the case, that looks pretty good. I'm going to change my mind on this whole conflict. But we saw a lot of that kind of stuff, the social media. We've even had guests, Bev, you and I, in the studio from the administration. I've forgotten the chap's name, but one of the guys from maybe the Department for Homeland Security who does a lot of the social media stuff. We've seen so much of it with the ICE operations and the ICE raids and the rounding up of illegal migrants, all sorts of clips and memes and graphics about retaking the homeland and really trying to G up the electorate and the supporters of the administration. I mean, I like it. It looks like a great piece of cinema, but I can definitely sympathise with your unease at it all. And it's a stark contrast, isn't it, to wars and conflicts of yesteryear, where maybe the only pieces of information you got were from mainstream media outlets who happen to have war correspondents on the ground. Now we have the likes of the White House and governments pumping out their own cinema-style pieces of, and it is propaganda. It's media designed to sway the public opinion of what's happening in the theatre of war. So yeah, as I said, not too sure who would be targeted at, because it's not going to convince any Democrats, but it's certainly fascinating, Beth.
Yeah. It is, and actually, Ben, that word of propaganda is quite interesting, isn't it, to be used in this context. But my goodness, does the American administration need to sell this idea to the public here? It's not landing well in polls. There are some very key right-wing commentators who are pushing back and saying this is an Israeli project, not America, and why is America being dictated to by Israel? And that issue, Ben, of how to communicate this to the American public came up, didn't it, today in the briefing room? For those who were just meeting us at 8 minutes past 1 in the morning, who were just tuning in, tell us what happened in that briefing room today.
Well, just also, I mean, first of all, the briefing today was fiery, it was high-tempered, it was packed, it was hard to get a seat or even get a view of Caroline Leavitt, President Trump's press secretary. But just on the Israel topic, you've just reminded me about a question that was posed to Caroline Leavitt today. Somebody asked about whether it was Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, who really convinced Trump to strike Iran on Saturday, because there was confirmation that Netanyahu apparently called President Trump and said, Mr. President, we have intelligence that the Ayatollah, his top team, all the mullahs are meeting at a certain time and place this Saturday morning. This is your chance to strike and wipe them all out. Caroline Leavitt was asked whether that was the deciding factor, whether it was Netanyahu who was the sort of the catalyst for launching this war, whether it was Israel that ultimately decided that America should get involved. Caroline Leavitt, very strategic with her answer. She said, yes, it did have some impact on the timing of when to strike, but she was trying to convince and insisting to reporters today that President Trump had made his mind up long before that call from Netanyahu. So make of that what you will. But in terms of the sort of high-tempered nature and the high tensions of the briefing today, we spoke last hour, didn't we, about Caitlin Collins, the CNN star anchor, who regularly skirmishes with this administration, albeit President Trump, or today Caroline Leavitt. Caitlin Collins asking Leavitt whether it was right that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, who held a Pentagon briefing this morning, had suggested, in Caitlin's own words, that the US media shouldn't be reporting on US military deaths. In fact, Pete Hegseth was saying, of course you should, and we pay tribute to those who have died, the 6 US servicemen and women in Kuwait from recent days. But he was trying to say the US media, and particularly the likes of left-leaning media such as CNN, Caitlin Collins and the rest of them, should be paying more attention to the achievements and the accomplishments of the military so far. Caroline Leavitt hitting back with some force, saying, all you do, Caitlin, you and your fellow reporters at CNN, all you ever do is try and paint the president and this administration in a bad light. You never once bothered to report positively on what's going on here, with either in the Iran war or anything else, immigration, gas prices, the economy. All you ever do is, and we go back to that word, propagandize against the administration. So a very fiery press briefing today, and it just goes to show about how high tensions are. So much at stake here politically.
Yeah. All right, Ben, thank you. You're going to hot-foot it back to the studio now because you're taking over from me at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I shall see you very soon. It's actually like there are, you know, around this war, there are 2 very tough jobs. There is Pete Hegseth and the Department of War deciding what happens next. And then there's Caroline Leavitt getting the messaging across. And both of those jobs are almost equally as important right now in this country as we sit here. Before I turn to my panel, let's have a quick look at that video once again, guys, because I want to know what you make of this. It's only just landed. This is, of course, from the US Central Command, and this is their take, their trailer, if you like, their propaganda about the war to date. Here we go.
The United States and its partners have launched Operation Epic Fury,
the most lethal, most complex, and most precise aerial operation in history.
Our military in the Middle East is undertaking an unprecedented operation to eliminate Iran's ability to threaten Americans, as they've been doing for nearly half a century. We are also sinking the Iranian Navy, the entire Navy.
We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it.
Combat operations continue at this time in full force, and they will continue until all of our objectives are achieved.
It's just lacking Tom Cruise, really, isn't it, at the moment? Richard, what do you make of that footage?
So I think what Hegseth and Caroline Leavitt and the administration generally are fighting is 2 wars. And no video is going to kind of address them. The one is actually what's happening, which is quite unpopular in the U.S. now. Even among Republicans, there's 70% support. Trump is a deity for many Republicans, and the fact that there's 30% that aren't on board with him is telling. But I think the thing they're fighting against even more so is we saw these exact videos at the beginning of the Iraqi war. Okay? The shock and awe of Baghdad, which was actually much more visual and explosive than anything we've kind of seen out of Iran, and we know what happened. There was all this jubilation, all this support, all this talk of weapons of mass destruction, and it was wrong, it was unfounded, and the American public soured on it relatively soon. George W. Bush got reelected in 2004 on the basis of it, but was exceedingly unpopular thereafter, which is why the Democrats did so well in 2006 and 8 elections. And I think one thing, we had elections yesterday in the states, in 2 states that are generally Republican states, Texas much more so, North Carolina to a certain extent. And the Democratic turnout, the outcomes were a big win for Democrats and really quite bad outcomes for Republicans. And I think at some level, it's the economy, it's everything, but I think people don't like what they're seeing.
I think we just saw a bomb drop there. Another bad night if you're in Lebanon. Just on that point, Richard, so you think, was it the turnout was particularly good from the Democrats, did you say?
The turnout was uncommonly high. Usually in a state like that,
that's false.
Well, it is indisputable that in a state like Texas, where you had a very hotly contested primary for the Senate nomination, ridiculous amounts of money spent, much more so than was spent on the Democratic side. It's a state where there are many more people that participate on the Republican side than the Democratic side. And the consequence was that people showed up for the Democratic primary because I think there's great enthusiasm.
But also, just to be clear for our British viewers, this wasn't a Democrats versus Republicans. No. This is a vote for who will get to stand as the Senate.
But I think
he's trying to extrapolate something that there's nothing to extrapolate out of in comparing this to Iran. There is no connection with Iran to the elections that happened in Texas and all over the country last night. Well, I mean, what I'm saying is you're hyping again, and Rich, you do this frequently.
The facts speak for themselves.
The bottom line is this: 77% of Republicans. This is just from NBC News. 77% of Republicans are for what's happening in Iran right now. You talk about the Netflixication, Bev. I disagree with the tone and the tenor of how you're framing this. It's not Netflixication. This is for the people who put Trump in office, who trusted him to get rid of Iran's nuclear program. That video is evidence and proof that he is doing exactly what he said he was going to do. And in addition to that, Rich, you want to make you think I'm too young to remember Iraq. No, I was an adult when that happened, and let me tell you something. This is nothing looks like Iraq. This is no boots on the ground. This is no troops committed to the region. This is strategic, and it's very limited and tailored in what we are doing. We're destroying their military. We are destroying their capability to cause terror like they have been doing for 47 freaking years. And that right there should be enough, Rich, for us to say, we will give you enough rope. We will give you enough rope to prove yourself out. And by the way, the War Powers Act, Rich, you know this as a lawyer. 60 days. 60 days until Trump has to go before Congress to get further approval and money. This is not some endless war, so can it, Rich, with this is exactly like Iraq. It's not.
Can I say one thing, Bev?
Yeah, go on.
The explanations given, and frankly, so far not yet from Donald Trump, not with a baseball cap on, but behind a podium in the White House, not Mar-a-Lago. We want to get rid of their nuclear capacity. We want regime change. We want to get rid of their ballistic missile capacity. We want to deal with the fact that they support proxies. All of that was true when Trump was first president.
Sure.
Everything could have been said about it, and he didn't attack then. Why is he doing it now?
Because Biden kept giving him money. And now they built up their arms and they built up their nuclear program because your guy,
which was obliterated 9 months ago.
Pallets of cash is your solution to this problem.
And I would also say why now, because they know that with Gaza and Israel, with Palestinian situation relatively peaceful at the moment, this is the best chance that the Middle East is going to have potentially in our lifetime.
When you have the Saudis
for a regional peace
when
settlement.
You have the Saudis, Qatar, Bahrain, when you have Oman, when you have all of these countries who have petty beefs between them teaming up together with the United States of America, that is unprecedented, and it's President Trump's hard work of saying we're bringing prosperity to this region. We're not bringing war, we're bringing prosperity to this region.
What Bev just said, I agree with, which is this is a great opportunity. And let's see again where we are in 6 months.
Yeah, let's bring Charlie Rowley in. Charlie, do you hear echoes of Iraq? We obviously, that war was under the false pretenses of these weapons of mass destruction. Some people are saying, well, you know, there's no evidence that Iran's nuclear capability had been resurrected from the ashes of the 12-day war in June. Do you think the American people need more evidence of that, or is it just a case of having to trust Trump and Rubio and Hegseth that they have the best interests of America? What do you think?
I mean, I think they're all brilliant questions, and I think because this has been such a fast-moving situation, there hasn't been maybe that groundwork enough where you tell, in this case, the American people enough that actually the threat of Iran, people are aware of it, people know of it, but the direct consequences of it. So, you know, what was the actual threat from Iran that was facing America? Because I think most people will have the assumption that, well, even if there was one, you know, America can take them, right? Of course they can. You know, it's the best and the biggest, you know, military in the world. So what is it now that poses that actual threat? But I think, look, you know, Donald Trump has done a lot of things over his first 2 terms. You know, I think he got to a point where, you know, you talked about, you know, Israel and Gaza there, you know, the Abraham Accords, which was sort of working towards peace, and it seemed to be the most peaceful that we've had in the Middle East when it came to Israel and Palestine. That was largely a lot of work between America and the UAE and Middle Eastern countries like Qatar, the Saudis, before it all went wrong on the 7th of October a few years ago. Now we're seeing Donald Trump, I think he did what was a very well-regarded tour of the Middle East, I think it was last year, meeting the Saudis. He's obviously been building relations with them, and I think they might have now come around to the conclusion that before, when they were slightly weaker than Iran, their economies have certainly grown, they're slightly more Western than this Iranian regime would have imposed on Iran. The Iranian people themselves, I think, can be perfectly wanting to be democratic and free like the rest of us. I think now that the dial has shifted, so where it poses now a perfect opportunity to go in to get rid of this regime for good, that is the right thing to do, but I don't know how much of that groundwork had been set before the intervention that we're seeing today. Yeah.
One of our viewers, Aid, makes a really good point. They say the difference between the Iraq war was Blair and Bush wanted the Iraq war. This war is wanted by the Iranian people. Now, of course, if Trump had done his little social media video there saying we're doing this for the Iranian people, then the America First lot would go, well, we're not bothered about them. If he said I'm doing it for the Iranian people, your lot might be like, marvellous, and the wokerati would come out and say, save the girls. He can't win.
Bev, I think...
Hang on, I want to hear Richard. He can't win, can he?
No, this was... Look, it's indisputable that this regime needed to go.
Yeah.
The question is, did we, as Charlie, I think, put his finger on it exactly, did we lay the groundwork that needed to be laid? Exhibit A that we didn't is all these thousands of Americans and Brits stranded. Remember, there were all these complaints at the end of the Afghanistan war that there was all this hurried stuff getting people out of the country, right? Yeah. Horrible, right? Well, it's horrible for these people there, too. You have friends over there now, correct?
Yeah.
It's horrible for them and horrible for everybody else who's there who, had this been played right, they could have been given an opportunity to get out, and who knows what's going to happen to them. So all I'm saying is there's a lot of dimensions to this. Yes, this is a bad regime. The notion of them having nuclear capacity was intolerable. Israel was living with a guillotine over itself. That's intolerable for them. So in that respect, yes, kudos to the crowd that kind of got them out. But could we have taken a little bit more time, since this wasn't imminent, to think it through a little bit more? Again, let's talk in a month or 6.
I don't see how this isn't imminent. I just
honestly
don't. I don't. I mean, like, it's a nuclear weapon. When you get a nuclear weapon, Rich, you know this. It's a game changer. You join the Security Council, permanent member of the Security Council in the UN. You become a major player. And then the strength, the alliance between Iran, China, Russia, that strengthens as well. And so what do? Do you just wait around until they have it and then you can say, oh, Trump was dithering and he waited? No, you go in and you take care of it so you don't have to look like President Barack Obama and Joe Biden did.
But also, not only would they have a nuclear weapon, remember how many terrorist organizations they fund throughout the world. It's basically handing a nuclear weapon to Islamic terrorists, and that can easily end up at the British door. I for one, I have to say, I think we all owe a debt of gratitude to this president for what he's doing in Iran. I am sleeping safer at night knowing that this is being taken care of, and I know that might be controversial.
And I think I just want to say, Rich, you know, look, I understand the well, we could have waited a little longer. Well, I don't think that that's the case. I think that you hear what you are told. And I hear what I'm told. I don't have a top secret clearance anymore. I used to when I was at the White House, but I don't anymore. So I don't know what's happening. I have no idea, and neither do you. And so to just speculate,
people on the Intelligence
speculate that there is
Congress,
no plan
members,
is very irresponsible.
The members of the Intelligence Committees, House and Senate, they insist, and they do have that clearance, that the capacity was not there, that it was obliterated.
And we know that members of Congress don't ever politic, and they never spin it when they come out of those briefings. In fact, I heard the opposite, that Chuck Schumer was actually very engaging and supportive in his questions, and then comes out and then does the politics. So you got to be careful with what you hear.
All I would say, the question that I've said every day since Saturday on this show is, if not now, when? That's it. If not now, when do you take out the Iranian regime, given all the power they have across the world, particularly with Islamic terrorism? Right, let me know your thoughts this evening. It's fascinating at the moment for me how the Your Say box blows up on American politics. A lot of them are wanting an explanation about what we were just talking about Texas and what's that controversial, and North Carolina. What's the name of the girl, the young mixed race girl? Jasmine Crockett. Thank you. We might talk about Jasmine Crockett in just a minute because it is quite interesting. Right, and also still to come this evening, this.
Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15.
We're hearing that thousands of Iraqi Kurds may be launching a ground invasion in Iraq, but what would the Iranian people want to materialise from current events? This is The Late Show live only on GB News.
We have the strongest and most powerful by far military in the world, and we will easily prevail.
We will easily prevail, says President Trump. And I think regardless of where you sit on this now, we do not want these words to come back and haunt him. Right now, it doesn't look like they will, but what does life look like for the Iranian people, and what do they need next? Let's talk now to author and Iran policy analyst, Dr. Ramesh Separad. Dr. Separad, thank you so much for joining us this evening. What do you make of these rumours we're hearing that there may be Kurdish ground troops prepared to go in and try and topple the Islamic Republic's regime? Does that sound plausible? And if so, what would that mean for the people in Iran?
Well, obviously, I'm reading the news just as you are. I've seen lots of reports that saying they're moving in, and of course, I've seen lots of reports that are saying they're not, and statements by the Kurdish organization. So I will let that one, I guess, pan itself out in the media. But what I can tell you is the current conflict that we're dealing with in Iran, and what really gets lost is the real war is between the people of Iran and the regime in power. And that's what we saw in the protests that broke out in December, late December of last year, leading all the way into early February, which ended up in an internet blackout and massacre of the protesters in the streets by the regime. We are dealing with a delegitimized regime. We are dealing with the regime that has been rejected by its people. We are dealing with the regime that is essentially seen the end of its regime. Now we don't see Ayatollah Khamenei in the picture anymore. There is no supreme leader. There is no institution that is currently governing the country as we knew it as Islamic Republic. So I think what we really need to talk about is that conflict and what is the political end game now that we have an external war and we have an internal conflict. What I would say is Iranian people are actually the source of legitimacy when it comes to the political endgame. I think any exit ramp that U.S. may be looking for should include supporting armed resistance against this regime. I'm very much heartened by the announcement by the National Council of Resistance of Iran and announcing the provisional government that they're standing ready to govern the the provisional government to transition the sovereignty to the people of Iran. I think this is the message that we have to continue to hear and continue to understand, because it represents the voice of the Iranian people. What are they saying? We want a secular republic. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, Ramesh, go on. You were about to answer the question I was about to ask. I was going to say, what is it that they want?
Excellent. So I think what they're saying is they want a secular republic. What they're saying is clearly a non-nuclear Iran. And what they're saying is a modern judicial system, the ballot box. This is the 10-point plan that was actually presented by Maryam Rajavi more than 20 years ago, and now it's time to really politically get behind it as a political endgame to the conflict that we're seeing in Iran. Again, 2 points that I want to leave you with for your viewers is the real conflict is what's happening inside Iran and how the Iranian people are rising up, and even if it takes that armed resistance to overthrow this regime. We have to be prepared to welcome a provisional government in Iran, and we have to understand the mandate of that provisional government is to transition the sovereignty to the people of Iran with the vision of the 10-point plan that Maryam Rajavi has. And one thing I do want to add, her plan is actually very much supported by the UK Parliament as well as the majority of the US Congress. And it is bipartisan support. In fact, I think Maryam Rajavi was holding an event with members of UK Parliament today discussing the very situation of Iran and what to come in after the fall of the regime. So I think this is the message that really needs to be talked about more.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. Iran policy analyst there, Dr. Ramesh Separat. Thank you so much for joining me. Just a quick word from my panel on what we heard then. That sounds very simple, doesn't it? A secular republic, modern judicial system, no nuclear weapons, and the Iranian people just have to rise up and accept it and make it happen.
And that's their choice. And they're going to have to make that. And I think that that's been very, very clear from the administration, Bev, that we don't want any part in this nation building. And that is similar. That does go back to Iraq, where we sort of learned that lesson that we're not going to spread democracy somewhere. But we will be targeted, and we will focus on the imminent threats that are, like you said, either funding other terrorist organizations or directly threatening our allies through ballistic missiles and a nuclear weapons program.
Yeah. Can you spread democracy, Richard?
Well, we'll find out. Again, right now, it feels like a fantasy because the people behind this current regime seem to be every bit as much right-wing and hardline as the people that have already been killed. We'll find out if they can kind of kill enough to kind of get down to a layer of potential leaders who are prepared to have what we call a normal state. I will say the one thing about the Kurds, one country that really doesn't like the Kurds at all is Turkey. So again, it speaks to the complications, what you talked with your guest about in the last hour. You know, every time you turn around and you think you've got a solution, well, if somebody else is not particularly happy with whatever that solution is, and if the Kurds get a foothold, Turkey's not happy, and Turkey's a part of NATO. It's just...
Here's the interesting thing about that, Rich. You're right. And I'll just say this. Iran fired a ballistic missile at Turkey today. And so if you want to unite around something, again, we were talking about uniting the region around the cause of U.S. taking out the threat, which is Iran. That's a perfect way of doing it. Uniting unlikely,
a common adversary. Nobody brings people together better than a common adversary, let me tell you, in life and in war. Let's talk now to Iran analyst and former political prisoner Navid Mohebi. Navid, thank you so much. You were listening to our conversation there and this speculation that actually a common adversary is a very good way to bring together other Middle Eastern countries who might have had, let's face it, less than peaceful relationships over the years. Do you see that arising out of this current war, Navid?
Are you specifically asking about the Kurdish groups?
No, I mean specific. I would love to hear your thoughts on that as well. But I mean, in terms of the rest of the Middle Eastern countries uniting against Iran and how powerful that could be?
Yeah. So based on Iran neighbors' public interviews and also statements before the war, many of them publicly say that they oppose U.S. intervention. But behind the scene, we later found out that, for example, Saudi or Emirati, UAE, they weren't, so much interested in keeping the Iranian regime in place. And now that they are seeing many of their infrastructure is being attacked by the Iranian regime, all of a sudden, I think many of them understood that the threat posed by the regime, it could be existential to them. It could undermine the trade routes and the energy needs of the international market. As you know, oil ships cannot bypass the Strait of Hormuz, so it is impacting the oil market at the moment. So I think based on everything that they are seeing and how recklessly the Iranian regime is acting in the Middle East, I think that many of them are coming on board supporting the overthrow of the regime. But I'm not sure exactly if they will want to join the coalition.
Navid, I want to know about your own experience, because you were actually imprisoned, weren't you, in Iran? Tell us what for. What was that experience like for you?
When I'm asked this question out of respect for Iranian people and especially what they have endured, I would usually like to talk about, many Iranians who are fighting against the regime. Just over the past 2 months, we had a massive uprising inside Iran. More than 32,000, based on President Trump estimates, have been massacred by the regime. What Iranians expected out of everything that happened to them was for the international community to intervene and help them. And this is what we are seeing right now. It's a humanitarian campaign to help the Iranian regime. Israel is specifically concentrated on dismantling IRGC and Basij bases, police stations. I think that would pave the way for Iranians to reclaim their country and take back their country. But in terms of what they want, I was listening to your interview with your last guest. I would always tell policymakers, politicians, listen to the chants of Iranian people inside the country, what they are chanting. Based on what I have been seeing, they are chanting only one name, and that is Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. And I ask everyone who disagree with me just, to provide your evidence. Are they chanting any other names? That's why I think that he has a huge chance to lead Iran, because on January 8th and 9th, it was because of his call that millions of Iranians took to the streets and chanted his name and demanding end to the regime. At the end of the day, the future of Iran should be decided by Iranians in a free and fair election. But I think that it's very clear that Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has the upper hand, because his name is the only name that is being mentioned by the people in the streets of Iran.
Okay, thank you, Navid. Really appreciate your time this evening. I'd love to have you on again soon. Navid Mohebi there, and he was talking about Crown Prince Pahlavi, who is the son of Iran's last monarchs. It means going back to the royal family. He lives down the road, actually. That's right. And he's a mate of Trump's, and he goes to Mar-a-Lago. I might try and have a chat with him. Anyway, moving on. Breaking news. We're hearing that the 5th and 6th US soldiers killed in Operation Epic Fury have been identified. We brought you the identities of the first 4 who were identified yesterday. We now know that these are the other 2. Major Jeffrey R. O'Brien, who was 45, and Chief Warrant Officer Robert M. Marzan, who was 54. Those are those 2 individuals there laying down their lives for their country. Major Jeffrey R. O'Brien, who was only 45, and Chief Warrant Officer Robert R. Marzan, who was 54 years old as well. So sympathies to their families this evening. Now, in more breaking news, we are hearing that Israel is preparing for a multi-week military onslaught on Iran. They say they want to dismantle the regime's military infrastructure. And carrying on at this rate, Tim, Trump's going to have this wrapped up in 2 weeks.
Well, it's interesting. If you listen to some of the reports from U.S. intelligence and military, you've seen Iranian missile launches reduced by 70% at this point compared to what it was when we first started. So I think he's actually correct when we continue to hit them. You know, where it hurts, where their missiles are, where their launchers are, where their capacity is. They're not going to be able to respond. This is exactly why oil hasn't risen above $80 a barrel. It's because at some point when you take out the Navy, when you take out their ability to close the Straits of Hormuz, there's not going to be any ability to close it because oil's just going to keep flowing through it. So I think that what you're seeing here is the depletion of the military, and it's exactly, and I just want to keep going back to this. This is never about regime change. This was about taking out their ability to cause terror and cause destruction and chaos throughout the world, which is what they've been doing for 47 years. And it's exactly why Rich was right when he said that they needed to go. And so how do you go? You take out their ability to flex their muscles, and I think that we're seeing that, Bev. Rich, do you have a response to that?
Well, I hope for Trump's sake, not a sentence I would usually utter, that he's right about it being over in 2 weeks, or that you're right about it, because right now what Americans are seeing is Americans are dying. Prices at the pump are actually going up quite a bit. It feels like the Middle East is on fire. You have all these Americans stranded. And it just feels, I mean, there's already a sense, whether you like to hear it or not, of chaos around this administration. The tariffs and Epstein and Greenland and you name it. This just only adds more to that feeling like, does this crowd really kind of have their act together? So it's a reason why Trump is at 59% disapproval among Americans, and why, frankly, Democrats are feeling so much energy as reflected in all these elections starting almost immediately after Trump was sworn in January 2025. So yes, if it's over in 2 weeks and all these objectives have been accomplished, it will be a real feather in his cap. And I'm putting a big question mark whether that's possible.
Yeah, Charlie Rowley, do you think it's possible? And I'm conscious to our viewers and listeners that we've done a one-topic show again, but obviously we are on something of a war footing here at GB News at the moment. Is it possible, Charlie, if you had to say how long this is going to continue? We've just heard that statement from Israel that's going to get ramped up. We've heard from Rubio and the president that they still haven't, they've not sent in the big one. We don't know what that's going to look like. I mean, what timings are we putting on this, Charlie? If you had to get your crystal ball out, what's it look like?
Well, the timing, I think, is only determinate in relation to the strategy and the aims. If you have many aims, then it's inevitably going to take longer, you would imagine. So I think when you have, and this is, I think, going back to the discussion we were having sort of slightly earlier, when you've got in the US a very domesticized president that had very domestic priorities, in the UK where people are obviously very concerned about the cost of living crisis, not being able to get an NHS appointment, all the rest of it, the idea that there is then a sort of foreign intervention is not number one on the public's agenda, and they might not be as abreast of international affairs and diplomatic relations that have soured, or where there is the alignment of Iran, China, Russia. Even though we say it multiple times, it isn't the number one conversation that takes place around the breakfast table. So when public opinion is against you, in the one sense, to kick things off, what you've got to have are those three things. You've got to have that unity. You've got to have a coalition of people fighting that front, which is why I think the UK should have been involved on the back of the US and Israeli involvement, because we're seeing others now get involved. We should have been quicker to that. But also, when the public aren't quite there, or they don't feel that they can support you, you've got to have two things, and that you've talked about it already. You've just got to have very, very clear strategic aims. What is the point? Why are we doing this? And this is the might that we're going to put behind it, and we can achieve that within super quick time. So whether it's 2 weeks of just fire and fury to get rid of that regime, and then it could be handed over to the Iranians to determine it themselves, so you can withdraw, fine. If that's what you've got to map out, if the public aren't on your side, governments have got to map out what success looks like, deliver on it, and deliver on it quickly, and then you can sort of hopefully justify the aims, get the public back on side, and move on to your own political agenda, whether it's the midterms, whether it's the UK elections here in May.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Well, Caroline Levitt said today, very clear on the aims, annihilate the Iranian Navy. She said they've not got a single ship that they can use now. Kill the terrorist proxies that can no longer destabilize the area and harm America, so that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon, she said, and they need complete dominance over Iranian airspace. They feel very clear, but she doesn't mention regime change. The president doesn't either. There is this fine line, isn't it, where they don't want to appear like they are being this imperialistic power trying to topple governments and install another.
I just want to say I agree with Rich when he talks about some of the lack of discipline when it comes to talking about tariffs or things like that from the. But you have to give the White House credit. They have been, and all of those attached, they have been extremely disciplined in keeping this, like you said, Bev, focused on obliterating their ability to cause terror and destruction around the world.
Yeah, because if they start saying, actually, we're going to pick the next leader, that opens them up to all sorts of criticism.
Correct.
That happened in Ukraine. Look how that's ended up. Yeah. Right, still to come on The Late Show Live this evening.
Not only did they cut the defence budget, they missed army recruitment targets every year for 14 years. They left morale in our armed forces at an all-time low, and our forces hollowed out. That's the words of Ben Wallace, the former Defence Secretary.
So GBNews understands that Britain's hope of protecting our military base on Cyprus is being left to our European allies as our Royal Navy ship is stuck in Portsmouth. Are we now the laughingstock of the world? This is The Late Show Live. No ads, remember.
By the way, I'm not happy with the UK either. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
Oh, it's not Winston Churchill we're dealing with. That is just so brutal, isn't it? Well, it is understood that the British Navy warship HMS Dragon will not reach our Cyprus military base excuse me, for another 2 weeks. So the Portsmouth-based Type 45 ship is worth £1 billion. It's not going to set sail until next week. Excuse me, and it's then going to take another week for it to arrive in its position in Cyprus. It is another humiliation for Britain, as the French and even the tiny military of Greece are sent to support us. And this delay serves as a stark contrast to America, which has, of course, yet again tightened its grip on the seas after a US submarine sank one of Iran's newest warships off the coast of Sri Lanka. We're looking at the footage here. Obviously, this is nowhere near the conflict. It's off the coast of Sri Lanka. It wasn't even there. But America went, well, we're not letting you have that ship either. We're going to blow the living daylights out of that as well. And, you know, fantastic. Not if you were on the ship, obviously, but otherwise, brilliant for America. But so much for Rule Britannia. And also, there's this.
Neither the sure prevention of war nor the continuous rise of world organization will be gained without what I have called the fraternal association of the English-speaking peoples. This means a special relationship between the British Commonwealth and Empire and the United States of America.
Oh, Henry Bolton, they were the days, weren't they? What was it? The Fraternal Association of English-Speaking Nations. Be still my beating heart. Those days are gone, Henry. How bad is it now?
It's damaged. Not beyond repair, but I don't believe it can be repaired until the present Prime Minister leaves office and we have another government. Quite simply, in a sense, the Prime Minister's speech just now, what he was referring to was years of defence cuts, years of neglecting the British Armed Forces ever since David Cameron and George Osborne came into power as Conservatives in 2010. They immediately took the knife to the Navy, the Army and the Air Force. And we have never recovered from that. There was also, at that time, a lot of people aren't aware, but they actually reformed the entire way that the defence budget was established. So up until then, the chiefs of staff, chiefs of the Army, the Navy and the Air Force under the Chief of the Defence Staff would identify, assess the threat facing the United Kingdom. The Prime Minister would be briefed on that threat, and then the Treasury would be required to orientate the package of financial support for the budget from that. So the finance would be orientated to the need to respond to the evolving threat picture that was facing the United Kingdom and her interests at home and abroad. Ever since 2010, that was turned around, and now the Treasury says, this is how much money you've got. You are required to undertake a more programmatic approach, which is multi-yeared, so that you can then slip expenditure. And the whole thing has now, it's lost the relationship to the threat. That's problem number one. But problem number one was the cuts in the first place. But the result of it is what we're seeing now. We've got European countries, the Greeks, the French, even the Germans talking about it, helping Cyprus, a European Union member state, to protect their territory, whilst the British are looking absolutely ridiculous. Now, we do have ships that we could have sent down there, air defence ships, the Type 25 that you refer to, HMS Dragon. We originally ordered 12 of them. Again, the Conservatives cut that down to 6, so we've only got 3 of these air defence destroyers. They're very, very effective, and in trials they have, although they weren't designed to do it, they have shot down ballistic missiles. They're very effective. We've got 3 that are operational at the moment. HMS Dragon that's going, but only just operational because she's been alongside in Portsmouth undergoing maintenance for over 70 days. HMS Duncan, which was already ready to sail and should have sailed, in my view, as soon as we realised that there was a likelihood of the Israeli and US strikes, because there was clearly going to be a threat to Cyprus, because the Iranians had stated that they would try and hit Cyprus. And you know, then we've got HMS Dauntless. The question for me is, why did we not deploy at least one of those ships, ideally 2, down to Cyprus the moment we were aware that it was likely that there would be war with Iran? By not doing that, we have not only exposed the British sovereign bases in Cyprus to serious vulnerability, but we've also exposed, by association, the island of Cyprus to serious vulnerability. We have a responsibility with having military bases on Cyprus. There are 3 of them. One of them particularly is very, very sensitive and highly classified. We are placing Cyprus in harm's way. We have a moral responsibility, I would say, to sort that out. But we're looking foolish. And the problem is ultimately the lack of decisions made by the British government. They've been far too slow.
So interesting, Henry. Thank you. Well, yeah, genuinely, really fascinating stuff that Henry Bolton, international security expert. I hadn't understood that about the change in the finance structure with the military. I'll be bringing that into the next show that I do here on GBNews, because I think that's a really fascinating way of looking at it. I think I've just got a few more minutes with you boys. Don't forget, Ben Leo's taking over at 2 o'clock in the morning to take you through to 3 a.m. as we are on a war footing. Right, what Henry said there I thought was so interesting, Richard. Let me come to you about the fact that the balance of power, if you like, changed in 2010 in the UK about who made the decision about the money. It got centralised to the bureaucrats rather than the experts in the military that knew what they wanted. That's a very EU way of looking at the world. Are you familiar with David Cameron? Because he was the boss at the time.
I have heard about him. Look, we may or may not get an answer to this question. When was the UK put on notice, other than just following the news, that this was going to unfold? Because if we had a real partnership, if this special relationship involved not just imposing tariffs and other threats, but real engagement, then there would have been some advance notice. So in fact, the UK could have begun moving its destroyers. But you know, if they didn't have that, And
it would be a great question, because we knew the Americans, we knew you were all on your way down there. That fleet had been heading over there for days. Was Trump on the phone to Starmer saying, come on, start your engines, mate, we need you as well? Or was he just, did he not make that call? That's your question, really, isn't it, Richard?
I would say this, I don't know because I wasn't there, so I'm not going to irresponsibly speculate, but I will say this. It would be out of character for Trump to not do that, to partner with Israel and not to include our special relationship, which is the UK. If he didn't include Starmer, that shows that he doesn't trust Keir Starmer. And that is a problem with a special relationship, because actually, every other time he would have.
I think I can blow a hole in that argument, because if Trump, having criticised Starmer, had not notified him, Starmer would have told the public. He would have said, no, I'm not taking this criticism. You did not inform me of what you were intending to do. You cannot criticise me now the ship has sailed, to use that metaphor in its quite literal sense. You can't criticise me. So that mustn't have happened.
So let me just make sure. So you're saying that Trump did notify Starmer?
I think he probably did say, are you on board, mate, or not?
And so what I'm saying is...
And I think Starmer went, oh, I don't know.
Exactly.
I'm just going to prevaricate for a bit. I'm not quite sure. We haven't quite got the metal that we need. I don't know.
And that's why Trump is going after it. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying that if he didn't, that would show a lack of trust in the special relationship. If he didn't let Starmer know, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if he did And if he did let him know and Starmer did nothing about it, then that has damaged the special relationship. And I think that is perhaps the more likely scenario, because as we know, Starmer is always as well worried about his Muslim voters. He's been talking to them repeatedly to say, I had nothing to do with this, I had nothing to do with it. Gentlemen, what a pleasure. I am going. Ben Leo is coming to sit in this seat, and I will be back on GB News next week. I'm taking a few days off now.
If we didn't hit within 2 weeks, they would have had a nuclear weapon. If we didn't do the B-2 attack a number of months ago, they would have a nuclear weapon. And when crazy people have nuclear weapons, bad things happen.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Morning. Thanks for joining me for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of a chilly start out there, but for many of us, it's going to be quite warm by this afternoon in the sunshine, certainly over England and Wales. More cloud and some rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A damp start, certainly for Northern Ireland and the west coast of Scotland. Eastern Scotland, it's fairly cloudy, but it's largely dry here. That rain only slowly creeping towards Edinburgh, but quite a damp day in Glasgow and Belfast. We may see some showery rain on the west coast of Wales, perhaps into Isles of Scilly too, but generally for most of England and Wales dry, and certainly for most of the Midlands and Eastern England it's very warm and sunny. Temperatures getting up to 16, 17, maybe 18, perhaps even 19 degrees Celsius. Now the rain will slowly creep its way down into parts of northern England. At the same time, it should be clearing from northwest Scotland by the end of the day, but it will eventually arrive on the east coast of Scotland, so things turning damp for the evening rush hour in Aberdeen. And the rain by this stage trying to pull away from Northern Ireland, but it may not have completely cleared from Belfast, pushing into northwest England, North and West Wales too by this stage, but still largely dry and clear over the Midlands and Eastern England. The rain will continue to edge southwards, but kind of fizzle out as it does so. So turning damp over parts of northern England as the rain moves in. There'll be a bit of snow over the tops of the hills. Clearer skies for western Scotland, Northern Ireland means it will turn quite cold here with a touch of frost further south, while temperatures mostly holding up, certainly in towns and cities at 6 or 7 degrees, a little warmer in the southeast. So Friday sees this line of clouds still providing some outbreaks of rain over northern England and Wales, but it will be fizzling out as we go through the day. Should be pulling away from southeast Scotland, so Edinburgh turning drier. A much brighter day tomorrow for Belfast and Glasgow. Plenty of sunshine over the Highlands, but a cloudier day further south and east, and nowhere near as warm tomorrow, certainly across the Midlands and northern England. Quite a bit chillier.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Cates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Bold. They are under no illusion. Ray.
Are you a human trafficker?
Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get us on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline.
Should we be worried about it? From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, very good morning to you. Live from Washington, D.C., this is GB News with the stories shaping Britain and America.
Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15.
Operation Epic Fury continues to take flight as the White House vows to take complete and total dominance of Iranian airspace tonight.
Iran does pose an imminent and direct threat to the United States of America based on the fact that they are the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism.
Meanwhile, Britain's strategic base in Cyprus is relying on allies for protection, namely Greece and France. What an embarrassment. That says HMS Dragon is left sitting idle in Portsmouth. Plus, breaking tonight, this is a big one. Thousands of Iraqi Kurds have just launched a ground invasion in Iran. That's as they aim to topple the Islamic Republic's regime. According to reports last night, they're being funded by the CIA. Also tonight.
But the hardest hits are yet to come from the U.S. military. The next phase will be even more punishing on Iran than it is right now.
The countdown is on until US stealth bombers land at British bases to join the attacks on Iran, as both President Trump and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio warn that the big one is coming soon. What do you think that means, the big one? Will it be tonight? I'm Ben Leo, and this is a special extended edition of The Late Show Live. Remember, no breaks this hour. Hello, Hello, good morning. Hope you're well. Thank you for your company at this hour. I'm Ben Leo, taking over for the third and final hour. Welcome to the Late Show Live. Joining me in Washington this evening is the Democrat strategist Richard Goodstein, and in London, my old friend, sparring partner, former advisor to Michael Gove, political commentator, GB News superstar, all-round nice guy, Charlie Rowley. Charlie, good morning. Thank you for your company. Send me the $5 in the post, please, when you get a chance. Right, let's move on to our main breaking news this evening. Thousands of Iraqi Kurds have launched a major ground invasion in Iran as they push to topple the Islamic Republic's regime. Both the US and Israel are thought to have been smuggling weapons to Kurdish volunteers since last year. And I'll add as well, reports last night suggest they are being funded by the CIA, something they have done before in the likes of Syria. Meanwhile, American B-2 stealth bombers are expected to land at British military bases in a matter of days to join attacks on Iran, as the White House warns the biggest hits are yet to come. And I'd love to know, viewers and listeners, what you think that means. The biggest hits are yet to come. gbnews.com/your say. If you're still up, if you're still sinking the coffees, the Red Bulls, other brands are available, or maybe the good stuff, let me know. gbnews.com/your say. Elsewhere, but Britain's air bases in Cyprus are yet again being left to be protected, embarrassingly, by our European allies, as the Royal Navy's guided missile destroyer, HMS Dragon, on your screens now if you're watching on telly, is not expected to reach Cyprus for 2 long weeks. And earlier, our dear Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, well, he took the opportunity to tear into President Trump.
What I was not prepared to do on Saturday was for the UK to join a war unless I was satisfied there was a lawful basis and a viable thought-through plan. That remains my position.
Well, let's be honest, judging on your performance for the past 20 months, Prime Minister, you're not prepared to do very much, are you, apart from posture and virtue signal? Breaking within the past few minutes as well tonight, the IDF, the Israeli Defence Force, has just released this video.
Nothing beats a jet.
I don't know what to think of this. Let's take another quick look at that. Roll it again.
Nothing beats a jet.
Yeah, it's the first time I'm seeing that video, and I understand the sentiment. I understand they're trying to rally the troops, maybe boost morale, and they're playing to their base. But yeah, I don't know. There's something about that I'm not entirely at ease with. In more breaking news elsewhere, we're hearing that Israel is preparing for a multi-week military onslaught in Iran, and they want to dismantle the regime's military infrastructure. Well, joining me in Washington, as I said, is the Democrat strategist Richard Goodstein, and in London, the man himself, Charlie Rowley. Richard, good evening. Nice to see you again.
Of course.
It's the first time I've seen that IDF little meme, if you want to call it a meme. It uses an infamous tune from a UK airline called Jet2. Maybe you're familiar. Look, I'm on the side of America and latterly Israel, but I just don't know how I feel about stuff like that. When people are dying, children are dying in airstrikes, whoever's responsible, I don't know. But I don't know. What do you make of it?
So there's that video, and we saw the U.S. version, which when you were in front of the White House in the last hour.
I liked that, by the way.
We all witnessed. And I think it's a real test. Look, this administration is chock full of people, starting with Pete Hegseth, who used to be on Fox News. Donald Trump himself was a TV host. And I think there's this notion that somehow or other they're going to be persuasive by virtue of showing hip videos. We'll find out. Right now, so far, it hasn't been working. If the polls are any indication, this war is unpopular. Most Republicans like it, but frankly,
well, there was 2 polls out recently. One, a Fox News poll, and one by, I've forgotten the name, showing it was now maybe 50-50 to support of the.
That's true. That's right. It was closer, but Trump's overall approval is underwater. 59% disapprove. That's a poll that came out today.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, it's a real challenge for them. And I think until the president stands up at the White House podium, in the White House, no ball cap, with a tie on, and kind of makes a clear case for this, I don't think there's anything Carolyn Levitt can do as the White House press spokesman to kind of move the public. I think the president making a very strong affirmative case has that potential, and it's just very odd for a guy who's just gravitates towards a camera for him not to have done that quite yet.
Yeah, that clip we just played, the one I didn't particularly like. I'm not sure actually if I like it or not. I just don't understand. Martin, you've said. Let me read some viewer comments. You said, Martin, I think that video, Ben, is very selfish. You shouldn't be having a laugh at other people's expense. Bad things are happening. I think the video is awful with the bet. Nothing beats a jet holiday. That is so wrong. Lynn has said, yeah, not a great video. Glynis, hello Glynis, nice to hear from you. You've said the IDF video is in poor taste in my opinion. Death shouldn't be celebrated so flippantly. And Beverly Pierce, hello Bev, you've said me too. I didn't quite mind the US one, because it was, I guess it was more cinematic. It was, you know, a good piece of propaganda. But the IDF one, the Israel one, for me is just making complete light of, let's take one more, it's making light comedically of war. And although we are, well, America and Israel are killing our enemies, Islamist despots, I still think you need a bit of grace about things. I don't, you know, let's take a quick look.
Nothing beats a jet.
Richard?
I mentioned in the last hour, I think the U.S. is fighting a problem which still goes back to the Iraq War. We saw shock and awe. There were all these great videos, and we saw then what happened in the course of that war. I think Israel, it shows a poor taste a little bit because we saw what happened with Gaza. And this, you know, these images of buildings being blown up are reminiscent of, frankly, what turned off so much of the world. I think it was unfortunate because Israel really had the upper hand after October 7th and totally blew it in terms of world opinion. And I don't think this really is sensitive to the perception of Israel around the world.
Okay, Charlie Rowley, GP on gbnews.com/say, has said, look at it from the context of an Israeli, post-October the 7th, Charlie, knowing the Iranian regime's hand in it, plus they've spent 47 years promising to exterminate the Jews. Has GP got a point? Are we, and fellow viewers on your say, barking up the wrong tree?
I don't think so. I think you're absolutely right. You know, you've got to portray an image of strength in war, and that's what the American video, I think, has done. It basically sort of showed all of its military might and firepower without some sort of over-celebratory, over-sort-of-glorification music sort of that was attached to it. I think, look, the problem with the video that we've just seen is that it's, you know, the music sort of lends itself to thinking, oh, this is all just a bit of fun, it's a bit jolly, when it isn't. You know, the job has not been done. The job is not complete. You know, Israel and the US have got a very, very serious job to do, which is to get rid of the regime, not necessarily to replace it, that's up to Iranians, but to wipe out the vile, dictatorial, terrorist funding, terrorist sympathising, the world's export of terrorism, you could say. That's its mission, and that has to be achieved. And we're 5 days in now. People will want this to come to an end. We're hearing that Iran is firing back. Iran will say that they haven't actually used their most mighty weapons yet, so we'll have to wait and see how they do, if they do respond, if they can. That might be their part of propaganda. But I think it's probably better for the two coalition leaders, or the two parties that are leading the attack on Iran, that is doing us all a favour across the world, let's be honest. I think just get on with it, get the job done, and then you can, you know, celebrate and herald in any way after that. But during this time, when there are many people that are still worried, I think I would rather just see a video or propaganda, or however you want to put it, of just projecting strength, not any kind of mockery.
Yeah, and I think, look, I don't want to be portrayed as some sort of Islamist simp here or a snowflake. Look, this is war. I as far as my young years will lend me, I understand what war is about, and that includes death and the elimination in quite graphic detail of enemies. But as I keep referring to, a few days ago, we had a school blown up with 168 children blown to smithereens. Their funerals have been held today. We don't know who's responsible. There were reports it was an IRGC rocket gone array. Similar to what happened in Gaza when the BBC, do you remember, they reported that it was Israel that blew up a hospital. The truth was it was a Hamas rocket. So we don't have the answers to that yet. Caroline Levitt, I was in the press briefing room today, she was asked about it. One reporter said quite explicitly, was it the US who killed 168 children. Caroline Levitt said, of course, it's never the intention for the US to strike civilian targets, and the Department of War is still investigating. So, look, we still don't know the answers. If it was the US and Israel, questions need to be answered, mistakes happen, fine. But as far as the IDF is concerned with that video, I'll just say it again one more time. I don't want to get too preachy about it. I just don't like it. That's the fact of the matter. Elsewhere tonight, Charlie, let me show you this clip and viewers from the UK High Commissioner from Cyprus. His name is Kyriakos Kouros, who told BBC Newsnight just a few hours ago whether his country feels protected or not by the British after what we've seen on Cyprus and the RAF base. So, of course, the Iranian drone, or at least a drone, I think it's been mooted tonight that it wasn't Iranian, after drones targeted the RAF base on the island. This is what the Cypriot UK High Commissioner, Kyriakos Kouros, told BBC Newsnight a few hours ago.
Do people in Cyprus, after this drone attack, as you said, it was unexpected, it's not what usually happens in Cyprus, do people in Cyprus feel protected by the British?
It's not an easy question to ask a diplomat who represents a country and the host is Britain. So let's say that the people are disappointed, the people are scared, the people could expect more.
And what is that more?
More cooperation with the government of Cyprus to safeguard that such incidents will not happen again.
Well, that's pretty embarrassing, isn't it, Charlie? We use the Cypriot base, the Greek base in Cyprus for our military operations. We get attacked. We are lackluster in our response. We have the French and the Greeks protecting us. And now Cyprus's UK High Commissioner says that he doesn't feel protected. The island of Cyprus doesn't feel protected by the Brits in return. I mean, for a country, for a nation, for a global empire like the UK, who used to rule the waves, we ruled the world, something's gone wrong somewhere, Charlie.
Oh, totally. Look, when asked the question, do people feel safe there? If it's not an unequivocal yes, then obviously the answer is an emphatic no. And I think he did well to be quite as diplomatic as he did when responding to that, but then I suppose that's his job. But look, the question around the UK's response and intervention, should we be aligned with the US? My personal view is that, yes, we should have done. You can't choose or you deal with the cards that are thrown in front of you, and if the window of opportunity to get rid of Iran, this tyrannical regime that has been the funder of international terrorism that wants to harm us here in the UK, if that opportunity arises, then you take it, regardless of whether, and we talked about earlier on whether enough groundwork had been done, because most people, whether in the UK or the US or around the world, they don't focus on international issues all that much. But the crux of it is, even if the Prime Minister says, no, I don't want to get involved, he knew about what was going to come, because the US obviously asked the UK to use our military base in Diego Garcia, which we refused. My opinion, wrongly, but that's the Prime Minister's decision. So he knew that something was coming. Why on earth we then didn't say, OK, right, we know that something's going to happen, we're not getting involved offensively, but we've got to make sure that we've got everything in our power to get to the Middle East, to get to the Mediterranean, to get to the seas, to the pathways that protect British people, that protect people and RAF bases and military bases, UK bases in that region. Why on earth that wasn't planned, or why that wasn't thought through, and now it's taking 2 weeks before we even send one ship there, and we're relying on the French and the Greece, as you talked about earlier on. That is pathetic. That is a total absence of leadership and responsibility, which is why everybody, as you keep hearing about, piles on the right, I think, criticism that the Prime Minister is just a lawyer sitting in Downing Street deciding on and pontificating on legal thresholds rather than leading and protecting the British people.
Charlie, I'll ask this question to you in just a second. We've got another guest down the line who's waiting patiently. I'll get to him very shortly, Michael. Richard, what do you make of the accusations and the barbs at, let's say, Brits, I guess it happens to Americans as well, who criticise their government? In this case, President Trump has slammed Keir Starmer for being this or that. And we have people like me who will say, well, yeah, Keir Starmer deserves that criticism. We deserve the flack for our response to Cyprus and so on. People will say to me, well, you're siding with a foreign power, you're siding with President Trump, you're being a traitor to your nation. Is there anything in that? Is there any weight in that argument? Should we, by default, support our government on public attacks?
Look, just like if you don't think your government is behaving the way an upstanding government, the way the people want, I think you're well within your rights to be criticizing. My question is, what notice did Keir Starmer have of this? So to what extent can we blame him for not moving more precipitously? Let's not forget, the day before this war started, the report was Marco Rubio was going to be in Jerusalem Monday, just a few days ago, and these talks were going to go on. They were going to be, and obviously, whether that was a conscious misdirection or whatnot, but you can't blame Starmer if he wasn't let in on the plan for kind of sitting on his hands, because maybe he too thought this might be resolved diplomatically.
Well, he could have straight away allowed the United States to use our RAF bases, Diego Garcia, instead of pontificating, as he always does, about international law. You know, just bobbling around like a bumbling. I mean, Boris Johnson called him the human bollard for a reason. He's got. Anyway, I'm not going to get involved in Keir Starmer. I've been bashing him all day. It's too easy. But with me down the line is Colonel Michael Jernigan, who is the commanding officer at the Marine Corps Engineer School. Michael, great to see you and speak with you. There's been some talk tonight about the United States getting ready to hit Iran with the biggest one yet. What does that mean exactly, please, in your interpretation?
Hey, Ben, thank you for having me on your show and tolerating an American Marine. In military campaigns, you strike when military campaigns, you strike the most dangerous targets first, the ones that can hurt you, the ones that can stop you from doing what you need to do, and then you move on to other targets. And so we've seen the Iraqis' ballistic missiles, you know, their launch rate has been degraded by 86%. Their drone launch has been degraded by 74%. So we've moved on from the most dangerous things to the next most dangerous things. So when I hear that the big one is coming, that means that they're, in my military planner's mind, that they're moving down the target list and always crossing off the most dangerous. And the most dangerous tonight and tomorrow is way down the list from the most dangerous on Saturday when it started.
Okay. In terms of the political fallout from this, which maybe you're not too sort of briefed on as opposed to military kind of involvement, what would the worst case scenario be for this administration? Forget the administration, for America. Would it be the sinking of a warship, maybe the loss of a couple of hundred sailors? Would that be truly catastrophic for President Trump, for the administration going forward?
You're right. I'm not qualified to talk about the political implications. There's always a cost in war for the winners and losers, and it's better to be a winner. So I'd like to talk about the cost of the Iranians. Right now, they've been bullies for 47 years. You've seen them throwing missiles and rockets and attacking airplanes and drones at every country around them except Turkmenistan and Pakistan. So everybody around them, you've just mentioned Cyprus, has been taking strikes from the Iranians. They've been bullies for years, and now they're getting what's coming to them. And so the Americans and the Israelis started it, and now others are piling in.
Pete Hegseth this morning in the press briefing at the Pentagon was saying we can hang tough with Iran, we can hang in there for as long as it takes. Does that mean indefinitely? Has the United States got the arsenal and the firepower and the resources to really just stay indefinitely? Because we hear that kind of rhetoric from Keir Starmer and his support of Ukraine, saying for as long as it takes. But what does really as long as it takes mean for sort of the everyday layman?
Sure. In my context, as you know, I fought alongside your lads in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And in my context, as long as it takes means until you achieve your military objectives. You know, on your show, you have lots of guests and you talk about the political consequences of a war and combat. And that's really, really important for democracies. But from the military standpoint, we have as long as it takes to achieve our military objectives.
Okay. Thank you very much for your company and for your service, serving alongside our great British men and women back home. Really appreciate it. Colonel Michael Jernigan, Commanding Officer at the Marine Corps Engineer School. Thank you, Michael. Right, gbnews.com/your say. Loads of comments. I'm surprised actually how many of you are commenting at this hour. Ice Cold Truth, he said, Ben, ask yourself what forms a country, the country's current leader or the majority of its population? Beverly, you said, we've not got a leader, we have a Muppet Prime Minister. Alan, you said, give Israel some leeway, they've had to take crap for too many years. And somebody else mentioned about that video, the IDF video, where is it? Basically saying it was appealing to the TikTok generation. I've missed the comment on your name, apologies, but thank you for that, saying that the IDF is just trying to appeal to the younger generation. Right, gbnews.com/your say. Still ahead on The Late Show Live this morning. President Trump says the United States will have total and complete control of Iranian airspace imminently. Will that come while The Late Show Live right now is on air?
Iran does pose an imminent and direct threat to the United States of America based on the fact that they are the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism.
The White House claims the US is hours away from complete and total dominance of Iranian airspace as Operation Epic Fury escalates alongside Israeli strikes on Tehran. That claim follows Britain finally, about time, allowing US forces to use UK bases in support of the operation. That's despite initial hesitation, bumbling and bluster from our dear Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. And breaking just now, the US Secretary of War has just released the following video.
I stand before you today with one unmistakable message about Operation Epic Fury. America is winning. This was never meant to be a fair fight. The Iranian Air Force is no more, built for 1996, destroyed in 2026. The Iranian Navy rests at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. 4 days in, we have only just begun to fight.
Richard Goodstein is back with me in DC, the Democrat strategist. Richard, maybe you know better than me because I'm only 36. I do have memories of the Second Gulf War, Iraq, and of course Afghanistan. But have we ever seen a conflict, in your experience, where politicians such as Pete Hegseth have been so explicit and so bombastic when talking about the enemy? I mean, Hegseth there this morning was talking about how the Iranian Navy is resting at the bottom of the Persian Gulf.
We haven't. Again, the contrast is behind the leading general, General Kane, who talked with great solemnity about the war and the loss of life and the taking of other life. And Hegseth spoke like a former Fox News host. And to Hegseth, it seems that it's all about kind of the bluster, and we will see in terms of the execution of this who's right. I think that Kane, having spent his life in the military, is speaking from experience, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Whereas Hegseth, because of his Fox News kind of background, can't help but try to kind of glorify what's happening. And look, it's wonderful that this regime was wiped out. It's wonderful if it ends up being the case that Israel won't have to live with a guillotine over itself for generations to come, which it's been living with, for the past many decades. All that is true. But again, it's all in the execution because, again, these images are so similar to the beginning of the Iraq War, the bombing of Baghdad, and again, the execution was so bad that George W. Bush was exceedingly unpopular by the end of his administration.
Charlie Rowley, are you bothered when you bear in mind what this despot Islamist regime in Tehran has been up to over recent decades, throwing gays off buildings and oppressing women and slaughtering tens of thousands of civilians and funding the proxies, the Houthis attacking the Royal Navy, Hamas and Hezbollah, October the 7th, all of it? Do you really care if Pete Hegseth gets on the podium and talks about how the Iranian Navy's at the bottom of the Persian Gulf? Because I'm thinking about it now in real time. Actually, thinking about it, I don't really care.
No, I don't actually, not particularly. I mean, I thought that video is probably better than the Israeli one, because at least you've got somebody talking about what it is that they're doing, and they're achieving their objectives, which is, as Caroline Levitt sort of outlined earlier on, as others have previously, that they want to get rid of the Iranian naval force, they want to get rid of their air force in the skies, they want to wipe out the tyrannical regime. So that is more of an update video with its dramatic, potentially Fox News type additional graphics, but I think broadly, I think that is better. But I think, look, when you've got a public that might not have been on board with the conflict in the first place, you've got to keep them on side. But you've also got to, I think what was key in that video is saying that it's only 4 days and they've been able to achieve what they've wanted to achieve thus far. They've got to then, I think, do whatever it is that they still want to do to bring this tyrannical regime to be brought to heel, to come to an end, to have them wiped out, and claim a victory sooner rather than later, because nobody wants it to be an ongoing war like Iraq. I think that is the key thing here. It's about getting in, it's about getting out as quickly as you can.
Can I ask you, Charlie, in your experience and background advising Tories, politicians, the likes of Michael Gove, why has the UK, I won't just pin it on Keir Starmer right now, but he is the Prime Minister, he can do it right now. Why has the UK been so reluctant and, well, they haven't even done it yet. I was going to say slow to prescribe the IRGC, but they've not even started to. Why the hell hasn't the UK prescribed the IRGC yet? Europe did it months ago, Australia, New Zealand have done it, the Americans did it in 2019. What's going on there? Who are we pandering to?
Well, it's a very, very good question, and one that the particularly Labour government will have to answer, because, look, the politics is, particularly for the Labour Party, and they are in government, they've got the history of the Iraq War hanging over them. They have got particular communities in constituencies that they might not want to upset. So they have to move quicker rather than not. But they've also got to understand that there are a lot of people in the UK, lots of Muslims, that have been very pro the intervention of the US and Israel. So, they can't just box themselves off, and they can't live in the shadow of Iraq. We've got the front page of the Telegraph this morning coming out to say that Ed Miliband, Rachel Reeves and Yvette Cooper all basically convinced the Prime Minister not to get involved. It is the politics and the history that they're worried about, because they don't want to be seen to be making that kind of mistake as they see it in terms of Iraq. But that's an easy decision. Is it the right one? I don't think it is, and I think it's not something that people want to really jump to. Nobody wants to jump to war, but if it is the right thing to do, you've got to sell it to the public. You've got to take that tough decision. You've got to be a leader, and you've got to be ready, even if the UK wasn't tipped off in advance, as it could have been in the past, or as we would have liked with our relationship, the strong relationship that we should have with the US, then you've got to be able to be nimble enough to respond. And just, if I may, to your earlier question about the relationship with the UK and the US, I don't want to see those spats in public. I know it must have been incredibly frustrating for the President not to get the permission from the UK, which I believe he should have had. But he hasn't had that. But when you're dealing with a global conflict, you're not dealing with something that's just on your border, you're dealing with an international regime, a regime that is backed by and allies itself with Russia and China and Venezuela, which I think was right to get rid of Maduro, also just as an aside. You've got to make sure that you keep a unity of strength, even if your partners let you down, and if that's the President's view about the UK Prime Minister, I think you've got to contain that somewhat, because otherwise all you do is allow the likes of Russia to play on that.
Let's be honest, and I'm not talking about Britain as a nation or its people here. I'm talking about how successive governments of all colours have let our military get into a very sad state of affairs indeed. My friend's in the Navy. I had a beer with him when I was back in England last week. He was telling me about how everybody signed up to the Navy to protect their nation, and now he just looks around. All the ships are failing sea trials. They're all being refurbed or refitted, sitting idle in docks. When you say that President Trump needs to look to nations such as ours in the UK for strength and unity, we don't offer any strength to the United States. And I don't mean to say that to put down Great Britain. I say it to highlight the fact that our brave men and women serving in the military have been thoroughly let down by successive politicians, men in dark suits, sitting round tables and chattering nonsense to each other for decades, whilst ignoring the very people who have been employed and tasked and putting their lives on the line to protect them and their children. So when you say President Trump should think more carefully about having spats in public because he needs his strong allies, the truth of the matter is, Charlie, we are not strong and we offer absolutely no relevance to the United States militarily whatsoever.
Ben, I'm so sorry, I've lost you. I think there's a connection problem in my ear. My batteries might have run out, but I'm sure whatever you said, it looked as though you'd with full vigour and firm, and I'm sure, as always,
I'll leave you to it.
I'm sure it would have been absolutely right.
I'll come back to you in a second, Charlie.
But I'll come back to you once I get my
Let's take one more quick look at that video, and then we'll... Yeah, all right, let's take one more look at that video, then we'll move on. Let's take a quick look.
I stand before you today with one unmistakable message about Operation Epic Fury. America is winning. This was never meant to be a fair fight. The Iranian Air Force is no more, built for 1996, destroyed in 2026. The Iranian Navy rests at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. 4 days in, we have only just begun to fight.
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth releasing that video just a few moments ago. You can see the passion, the intensity, the results, the might of the US Navy. And I was just talking about my beer with my friend from the Royal Navy a few nights ago when I went back to the UK, saying that, you know, he was pretty embarrassed with how things are going. Somebody on Your Say, gbnews.com/Your Say, has just sent a great comment. Darren, hello Darren, you said, Ben, I'm listening to you, I think that's what you mean, in the gym here in Dubai. I must say, having spent 24 years in the Royal Navy, through tanker wars, the Gulf War, the 1 and 2, plus other areas of operations, I feel embarrassed as to what the Royal Navy has been reduced to by recent governments and pandering to minority issues rather than keeping Britain great. And that's exactly what I was just talking about, Darren. My friend said the same. Living here, even with the current situation in Dubai, I feel safer than I ever would walking the streets at night in London or Bournemouth. I feel proud of the UAE, my home for the past 12 years, a country and leadership I trust, which is more than I can say for the government and leadership of my country of birth and for whom I serve to protect. Anyway, must go off to work, life goes on. Darren, thank you for that. And I make the distinction, it's not Britain the country, it's not Britain the people, it's not our ancestors who made Britain great. It is successive, inane, inept politicians, self-serving, selfish politicians of all colours over generations who have, quite frankly, failed in their simple duty to protect Britain and her people. Darren, thank you for that. Got some breaking news in the last couple of moments. The United States Homeland Security Advisor, Stephen Miller, has just commented on Operation Epic Fury. He said on social media, "What you're seeing now is a military that is unleashed in all of its lethal prowess to go out and seek, destroy and kill the enemy, which is what militaries are for." Let me just repeat that. What you're seeing now is a military that is unleashed in all of its lethal prowess to go out and seek, destroy and kill the enemy, which is what militaries are for. That was Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller, who more infamously is known for his hardline take on immigration. Well, with me now is senior Iran analyst Omid Memarian. Omid, great to see you. Where do you see this conflict going to in the next, say, look, it's only been 5 days, but it feels like a lot longer than that. Let's just say that. Where do you see this conflict going in the next 5 days, Omid?
It seems that the United States and Israel have diminished a good portion of Iranians' military over the past few days, and they have attacked Iran's missiles and program, the launchers, and they have reduced their capabilities to a large extent. And internally, Iran is dealing with a power vacuum of the death of their supreme leader. And so there is a lot of conversation about who's going to be the next leader in Iran. It's obvious that there is no love lost between the majority of Iranians who want this government to go. And this government is cruel, is repressive, and as you have been reporting, in January, they just killed like thousands of people. At the same time, we had a development in the U.S. today that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, said that the U.S. is going to investigate the incident in which more than 150 school children were killed. And it appears that increasingly that the United States was behind this attack because there is a divide in responsibilities and the attacks. Israel is taking off the north and the U.S. is attacking the south. And this is a good news that the U.S. is going to investigate this attack. And I have to say what Pete Hegseth said the other day, that when he called the rules of engagement stupid, and the way the U.S. is looking at rules of engagement very loosely, it's very troublesome. The reason is that, yes, we all agree that the Iranian government is repressive. We all agree that they kill their people. We all agree that they have been in trouble in the past few decades. But rules of engagement is what separates the Western world, Western democracy from the rest of the world. This is something that we have to value, but we cannot look at it as a stupid thing. And I have to say, even if you're drunk, you shouldn't say that. What he said is court material. It could be used against many people in court. So anyways, I have to say this is a big development. I'm happy that they are investigating, and I hope that we hear about this investigation, because there are values that you should respect even during war. Even wars have rules. Even wars have there are laws about war, and international law matters. And I hope that that's how the U.S. conducts the war.
Well, look, you're saying there is increasing evidence that the US was responsible for that strike. I mean, I've not seen it. Hegseth said they're investigating. Caroline Levitt said they're investigating as well. There was some rhetoric that it was an IRGC rocket that went amiss, as we saw, I've already talked about, as we saw in Gaza a couple of Decembers ago, when the BBC came out and said that it was Israel who bombed a hospital in Gaza. It wasn't. It turned out weeks later that it wasn't. So I do think, although there will be many people, look, I'll be frank about it, they'll be cheering on the prospects that it was Israel or America that bombed that school and killed those poor children. I think we should just wait until we hear the facts. But also, with Hegseth...
Anybody who has been behind this, there should be an investigation, Yeah. There should be an investigation.
Yeah. Whether you think Hegseth's comments are stupid or not, I mean, I don't think you can link them to the bombing of that school, saying that the rules of engagement are stupid. I think if Hegseth was here now, he'd be saying, well, that, of course, A, that was in no reference to the bombing of the school, and B, I utterly condemn the bombing of the school.
Yeah, there's no direct reference, but when you say that the rules of engagement are stupid, and repeat that like a few times in the past few days, one of the major pillars of rules of engagement is the protection of civilians. And we have been seeing like bombings in Tehran on Wednesday. They have dropped 2,000 pounds of bombs in Tehran, and I know of people who have been living in the bathroom because there are no glasses to protect themselves from these bombings and shockwaves that these bombs create. Yes, many of these attacks, or we can guess all of them are targeted, but these bombs have collaterals, and many people have been killed as collaterals.
I mean, so is this not what the Iranians want, though? You were saying the Iranians were cheering for this project and this conflict. Is that not what the Iranians want? I mean, what are the Americans and the Israelis meant to do?
We have 90 millions of. We have 90 millions of Iranians. A good portion of them, I have to say, like including myself, I want the regime to go yesterday, not today, not tomorrow. The regime is repressive. I've been in Iranian prisons myself. I've been tortured by the Iranian regime as a journalist when I was in Iran. So many people want the regime to go, but what I'm saying is that the U.S. also has responsibilities when they conduct the war. There are rules of engagements. We have protection of civilian lives, and so I think that should be taken very seriously. I think it's against American values, it's against Western values, liberal democracies, and so the fact that they are going to investigate, and I think we have a rule of law, and I hope that the investigation shows the transparency and and the rule of law in the U.S. But in general, what we are, you asked, Ben, what we are seeing in the next 5 days. I think the Iranians have lost lost so much of their military capacity, and the U.S. has opened a new front on the western border of Iran by sending armed forces to the Kurdish area of Mariwan. And we have to see how it's going to unfold, because we are seeing this war turning to a much bigger war than expected. Like just even last week, we have people on the ground fighting. So we have to see how it's going to unfold. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Omid, you're quite right with the school bombing. We need answers. If it was the US, if it was Israel, they need to learn not to do it again, and not least for the families of those poor babies. 168
and I really appreciate
people,
you mentioning that.
Young children.
And I really appreciate you. And I really appreciate you mentioning that in your previous segment.
Yeah, no problem. Omid, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Great speaking to you. Hopefully you can join us again on the Late Show Live in the coming days.
Thanks,
Omid. That's Omid Memarian, Senior Iran Analyst. Richard, very quick word from you. Omid there was talking about Pete Hegseth again, the language. This is a common theme we're discussing tonight, the language and kind of the bombastic attitude, saying the rules of engagement are stupid. I missed that comment. I hadn't seen him say it. Had you seen him say that?
I haven't. But look, you quoted Stephen Miller immediately before this interview saying that this is what militaries do.
Yes.
The Israeli military leveled Gaza. Tell me, do you think Israel is a stronger country, more respected around the world by virtue of having done that or not? I would suggest, and I'm second to nobody in my support of Israel's independence and freedom, I would say what Israel did in Gaza set it back. And I would say, to the extent that that the attitude is bomb away, for the U.S. in Iran, I just question whether there's wisdom behind that, as opposed to this kind of bravado of Hegseth, again, having come out of the Fox News, and Stephen Miller never really having. By the way,
Hegseth is a decorated veteran. He served in Afghanistan. He didn't just rock up to Fox News.
But he's not somebody who has kind of a history of leading people in the military in a way that every single Secretary of Defense before him did. Okay, and he spent many years doing nothing but being a Fox News commentator. I was opposite him, as close as you are to me, more than once. That's his bona fides. That's how we got into the administration.
I think you're being a little unfair on him. I've just googled this. Obviously not.
Yeah, he's credentialed. He went to Princeton. I understand.
Right. So he was at Guantanamo Bay as an infantry platoon leader. Then served in Baghdad and Samarra. He was in Afghanistan as a counterinsurgency instructor in Kabul. He's got 2 Bronze Star medals, various other awards. Yeah, I mean he's not just some national, some private who did a few years then turned up to Fox.
In the Pentagon, if you got people to speak to you candidly, they would tell you they have very, very little. I mean, other than the political appointees who, again, worship Trump because he is a deity, and therefore they would worship Hegseth. But putting those people aside, the lifelong military people do not have much confidence in Pete Hegseth.
All right, you'll know better than me on that. Yeah. I'm sure you're much more in tune to the Pentagon than me. Some of your says here, Andy, you've said, actually, Andy, you're not the first person to say this. I guess I called a boat a ship or vice versa. Andy has said, Ben, great show. Let me sort some myths about boats and ships. Reference the Royal Navy tub. It's a boat, not a ship. A ship carries other boats. Not talking about life rafts. So a cruise ship is a ship because of the lifeboats, the lifeboats they carry. A sub is a boat. Got you. I've obviously called a ship a boat or vice versa and got it wrong, so apologies for that. Thank you for correcting me though. Yeah, some others coming in. Stu, you've said if the rules of engagement separate the West from the rest, you could argue that as they don't follow the rules, we shouldn't either. Yeah, it has to be said. Maybe the rule books are just being ripped up in the last couple of years, as Richard has just alluded to. Still ahead on The Late Show Live tonight.
Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15.
Some more breaking news. It never ends, does it? Coming out of Iran to bring you next. No breaks, remember. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News. Right, here's that breaking news. Dozens of IRGC members were reportedly just targeted after a major strike hit Bukhan in Iran. The IRGC, of course, is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. This footage I'm about to show you has just dropped into the GB newsroom. Wow, that looks devastating. So IRGC members targeted there. Let's take a look at some other footage of that same incident. Roll the tape. What they meant, do you think, viewers and listeners, by the biggest ones are yet to come? It does look devastating, but I suggest there's probably more to come. That major strike follows what we were hearing earlier in the show from the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, who said they were preparing for a multi-week military onslaught on Iran to, quote, dismantle the regime's military infrastructure. Richard, your thoughts looking at those pictures that are just dropping?
Again, it's reminiscent, but a lesser version of shock and awe that began the Iraq War. I assume it's very targeted to pick out the militants who were kind of running the regime. In a densely populated city like we just heard from your last guest, it's very hard not to have collateral damage. Yes, Iranians want this regime to be eliminated in the worst way. They're the beneficiaries of it. And I agree with the sentiment that you expressed and some others. For Starmer, to the suggestion that somehow he's appealing to Muslims by holding back doesn't make sense. Most of them, certainly any Iranian, desperately wants this regime to be removed. So I kind of question whether he's really kind of pussyfooting around this because of concern about Muslim votes. But again, the question then becomes, what's next? Okay, you're going to drop all these bombs, you're going to have the big ones. What's going to enable people to take to the streets? And as Trump said early on, my goal is when we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will probably be your only chance for generations.
Yeah.
What's to make sure that it's that and not some other people still armed mowing down these protesters like they did a month or so ago? That's the big question.
Just on the Keir Starmer point, Charlie Rowley, you're still there, I believe. On the Keir Starmer point, I argue, and many others argue, he is pandering to the Muslim vote in the UK. He was at an iftar just a few nights ago, appearing to, he didn't look at the Prime Minister. The Muslim he was hanging out with looked like he was controlling Keir Starmer. So to say or suggest that Keir Starmer doesn't care about Muslim votes, I think is inherently wrong. We've seen what happened in the Manchester by-election in Gorton and Denton. We've seen what happened with Wes Streeting's seat, almost losing his seat at the election in 24. We saw what happened with Jonathan Ashworth, who lost his seat for Labour in 2024. So Labour do pander to Muslims.
Well, he's certainly pandering to the view and telling everybody, anyone that's prepared to listen, that the UK was not involved in these strikes. He's very keen to push that message. And as you say, he had a meeting, I think, with people in the Central Hall of the Westminster of Parliament, talking to people. When he said that we hadn't been involved, there was there was a tepid round of applause, but it grew. I think after one or two people were quite loudly applauding and encouraging, because he doesn't want to be seen to getting involved in the Middle East. It's a Middle Eastern, in his view, I think, a block vote of people that don't want to see the UK getting involved. And also, don't forget, look, we talk about the migration problem that we have in the UK. Of the top 3 countries of people that are coming across illegally and in small boats and migrating to the UK is Iran, Iranians. Now, we don't know who those people are. We don't know whether they're supportive of this regime, or whether they're the people that we've seen protesting that are brilliantly, in my view, standing shoulder to shoulder with UK and US flags. We simply don't know.
Charlie, what do you make of this new footage that's just dropped into the Late Show Live tonight, this massive strike in Iran? I think it was the IDF who said recently they were preparing for a multi-week military onslaught. We see this footage now that's just dropped. It's strikes on a government building in Buchan, I think that's how you pronounce it, B-U-K-A-N, in Iran, which apparently was home to IRGC members. Absolutely devastating. Massive fire and smoke billowing from the strike site. Residential areas and businesses were also damaged in that strike as explosions were reported all across Tehran. Pictures on your screens now if you're watching on television. There was another angle. Is this the big one that they were talking about earlier tonight, Charlie?
Well, I mean, who knows? Because, you know, the military might of the US and Israel suggests that they could do wave after wave after wave. And I think, look, you know, if it is targeted, as I think we heard from a previous guest, it was brilliant in sort of saying, look, you know, you first go after the supreme leader, you go after the military leaders, then you start to work your way down the list of the infrastructure, destabilising the Ayatollah, destabilising areas and buildings that the regime hold, whether and this may be the images that we're seeing, as you say, of those big dark clouds of plumes of smoke there that are coming out of those targeted attacks. You hope that that is further destabilisation of the regime and those that work for it. But, you know, Iran have said earlier on that they will fight for as long as they can. They want this to go on for as long as they can. Well, or for as long as they want. Well, that's one thing.
So does the US.
But it won't go... Well, exactly. I mean, Iran can say that the fight will go on for as long as they want it to, but it won't go as long as for what the Americans want it to go on to, and the Israelis, because I think their firepower, I would hope and expect it to be 10 times as much, even more so than what the Iranians have, and they will be the ones to decide, I think, when this conflict comes to an end.
Yeah.
And I think we can all just hope that it gets resolved and comes to an end sooner rather than later.
OK, one more little update to bring you viewers and listeners from this evening. Richard, you'll know about this. There was a vote in the Senate this evening on war powers. So the Democrats mainly and a few Republicans accused President Trump of launching this conflict without permission from Congress. Unconstitutional. There was a vote which, if the Republicans had lost, would have forced, potentially, unlikely though, because Trump could have vetoed it, to end this war within 30 days. The vote was lost. They needed 50 votes. 47 Democrats voted for one. I think John Fesselman from Pennsylvania voted with the Republicans. So the vote lost. How much does this mean to President Trump tonight? As I said, he could have just vetoed it anyway if it hit his desk. But is it a win politically?
It's the whole thing was a messaging vote, as they say. This was not going to have real consequence because, again, Trump, as you correctly noted, would have vetoed anything, and there were certainly not going to be nearly enough votes to override his veto. So this was done by Democrats to, frankly, put the Republicans on record, and I guess they're putting themselves on record, right?
Can he say he's got a mandate now?
No, because, look, again, the public seems to be split on terms of whether they are supporting what's happening in Iran or not. Trump's disapproval is at 59%. Republicans are doing quite poorly in all the elections. We saw a little bit of this yesterday. So, no, I don't think there's any kind of mandate. But I just think that at some point, either he has to have a good resolution of this within a matter of a few weeks, or it becomes a real albatross around the neck of Republicans and himself.
OK. Richard, great seeing you. Thank you very much for your contributions tonight, and hopefully we'll catch up soon. Charlie Rowley, if you're still there, sweet dreams to you, my friend. Thank you for your company tonight. We'll catch up soon. And, of course, the viewers and listeners, thank you as always for your company this last hour. I'm back tomorrow for the full 3 hours. I'll see you there. For now, sweet dreams, sleep well, and have a good day tomorrow. See you tomorrow night. Good night.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Morning. Thanks for joining me for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of a chilly start out there, but for many of us, it's going to be quite warm by this afternoon in the sunshine, certainly over England and Wales. More cloud and some rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A damp start, certainly for Northern Ireland and the west coast of Scotland. Eastern Scotland, it's fairly cloudy, but it's largely dry here. That rain only slowly creeping towards Edinburgh, but quite a damp day in Glasgow and Belfast. We may see some showery rain on the west coast of Wales, perhaps into Isles of Scilly too, but generally for most of England and Wales dry, and certainly for most of the Midlands and eastern England it's very warm and sunny. Temperatures getting up to 16, 17, maybe 18, perhaps even 19 degrees Celsius. Now the rain will slowly creep its way down into parts of northern England. At the same time, it should be clearing from northwest Scotland by the end of the day, but it will eventually arrive on the east coast of Scotland, so things turning damp for the evening rush hour in Aberdeen. And the rain by this stage trying to pull away from Northern Ireland, but it may not have completely cleared from from Belfast, pushing into northwest England, north and west Wales too by this stage, but still largely dry and clear over the Midlands and eastern England. The rain will continue to edge southwards, but kind of fizzle out as it does so. So turning damp over parts of northern England as the rain moves in. There'll be a bit of snow over the tops of the hills. Clearer skies for western Scotland, Northern Ireland means it will turn quite cold here with a touch of frost further south. While temperatures mostly holding up, certainly towns and cities at 6 or 7 degrees, a little warmer in the southeast. So Friday sees this line of clouds still providing some outbreaks of